All right, hey guys, weather's up. We are live against all odds, it seems. This is the movie discussion pocket dimension where time does not exist. The only thing that matters is film. I'm Cole, and with me, as always, is Jay. And yeah, we're doing a rare Friday show. We don't usually do these, and we try to avoid it because I don't know. Since the normal time is usually Tuesday or Wednesday, it feels like if we do a show on Friday, it doesn't give us a whole lot of time to prepare for the next one. And we would very much like not to miss any more weeks after the kind of uh, uneven comeback we've had since we've been off since August, and we finally came back a few weeks ago. And then, yeah, it just seems like you're saying it felt like this episode was cursed because forces kept coming, conspiring to stop us from doing it. I mean, yeah, there were a couple times where I guess we could have done it if we absolutely had to, but again, we try to not just. We want these to have decent quality, so it's better for us to do them when we feel completely up to it, and the circumstances are, if not ideal, at least decent. So that's why we come to you on a Friday tonight for a show that's been, pushed back and delayed several times, and that is Persona from 1966 from Ingmar Bergman, who, if you might remember, we did our Masters of Film series a couple years ago. He's one of the guys that we did do. We did, I think, from a couple years after this, I think it's 68, Hour of the Wolf, which is not nearly as well known as Persona, because that was kind of the point of that series, to maybe touch on some of the lesser-known works by some famous directors. But Persona was still one that we'd always thought about doing, just because it's such an analyzed movie. Like, if you look it up on Wikipedia, there's a whole section called Themes Interpretations that's rather large, and it's just one of the most dissected movies ever. And so the flip side you could say about this is like, well, what can we say that hasn't already been said? Probably nothing, but we still thought it would be a good thing to tackle and an interesting sort of movie. Plus, I don't know, I think, we had some older stuff on the back burner for a while, and I just felt like doing something a bit older, which is really the only impetus that led to this.
And hopefully going forward, we'll have a little bit more options of what we can watch. And we can, all of our Netflix and Primes will be the same.
Yeah, that's true. We're trying to take steps to maybe line some of that up. This is not, well, I don't know if this is streaming or not. This is one that I recorded off TCM quite a while ago and kept, because I'm always watching TCM and looking for various classic movies and recording them if I have the space. I hate knocking them off, but I probably will. I probably will knock Persona off just because I've watched it so much recently. As we were saying before this, since the show was going to come together a couple times and didn't happen, had a few false starts. It actually led to me watching the movie almost 3 times, two times fully, and then almost another time. So I guess you can say I'm prepared. So I guess I probably will knock it off to make space later, since I'm probably not going to be watching it again anytime soon. I feel like I've absorbed it enough.
It's always the gamble with the DVR. Always having to, am I going to watch this again?
I wish mine doesn't give me any sort of percentage or anything. Like, mine doesn't tell me, if I'm close or what. So that's the really annoying part about how mine is. And I know that, I have the same cable provider as my parents, but I have a different package, and they have a more expensive one with more channels. But they also, it seems to give them more space, because because my mother has so much stuff on hers, it's ridiculous. 3 times what I think I have. So I'm forever, knocking stuff off to make space.
Yeah. You'd think that, by now they would be much larger capacity.
Well, that's what I think. I think mine is fair. I think, there are ones that are large, but just because the cable deal that I pay for doesn't give me one of the larger ones.
Right.
It's not like there isn't a lot of stuff. I can hold quite a few hours, how quickly that goes up. And it's just how much I notice the difference between my parents and my own one. But what annoys me the most about it is there's nothing that tells me. The only time it tells me I'm close is if I'm right at the very limit. I try to tape something, that it'll warn me and say that it probably won't be able to tape it. That's the first thing. I could be at 98, 99% per capacity, and it won't say anything or anything. So it's always a lot of guesswork. Plus, and then it leads to stuff not recording properly or not recording at all. And plus another thing is I always had to put the settings on to save until, and I always put I erase, because if I don't
Yeah.
do that when space is needed, so many, I can't tell how many times I tried to like tape something like, I don't know, like UFC fights or something, and I get up in the morning and it's gone because it taped, but the second it was recorded, it just deleted itself. Like that happens so many times, it's annoying. So yeah, but anyway, I do have several other sort of classic-ish movies recorded from TCM, and from some of those, I think we can choose. But yeah, as far as streaming options go, I don't really know where Persona might be available. Maybe something like MGM or something.
I mean, it's on Prime, but you just have to pay for it.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That's what I did.
I see. So yeah, so we had done Ingmar Bergman before. I didn't watch that episode recently though, so I can't remember. That was one we had to cut short too, because I think there was like a hurricane or something not too far from you. I don't know. Anyway,
Sounds about right.
I don't even think it was 2 full hours that we did, because your connection was getting messed up.
Okay.
So I guess it's one of our lesser episodes, but that's not really our fault. That's just something that happened. So yeah, but I mean, we covered it as best we could in the time that we had. But yeah, so this predates that, and this is and that one is kind of similar in this one, is that Bergman's usually his thematic approach is usually something kind of vast. It's usually about really big concepts like religion and death. Like they're all over his movies, especially his most famous one. But Persona is, even though it's probably his second most famous one after Seventh Seal, actually eschews that and is more of just a character study and just sort of about humans and individuals. I mean, I'm sure in all the stuff that's been said, you could probably pull some religion out of it, because you can apply religion to pretty much any movie at some point. In some way, you can interpret it. But yeah, this is a much more personal approach. So in 1965, the year before the movie came out, I couldn't find out. I guess I could have looked into it, but all I know is that Bergman was quite ill, and he was actually hospitalized for several months. And it was while he was in the hospital that he started working on the script that would become Persona. And I know that originally he wanted to title it Cinematography, but somebody talked him out of that. And I think Persona is a way better title. What, you've muted yourself, Jay? You're muted.
Sorry.
Yeah.
It's mask in Latin. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Which
makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. The guises that people adopt either in everyday life or for performances, and that's tied into it too, as one of our two main characters is an actress. And that's what kicks off the action. You have an actress, a fairly well-known, successful person, who just suddenly, in the middle of a performance of a play, just stops talking. And then she does talk later that day, because she does apologize to the rest of the cast and crew. But then after she goes to bed, the next morning when she wakes up, then she's just completely mute. But it's still like what's the word? Selective mutism, because she is capable of speaking. It's not like she can't do it anymore. And so now she's just completely withdrawn from the world. She won't speak or move. And even though she has a husband and a kid and everything like that, she's just withdrawn from her life. So she gets sent to the hospital, where doctors examine her and they can't find anything is physically wrong with her, nothing to really explain it. But yeah, so who's that? So B.B. Anderson is Alma, the nurse character, the younger, but it's somebing Ullman.
Liv Ullman?
Liv Ullman. Liv Ullman is it's the other one playing our actress. Liv Ullman is a Norwegian actress, and actually she would become Bergman's lover. And they had a kid like the year this movie came out, I think. And she would go on to like be sort of his muse, because she'd be in like 9 of his next 9 movies. She's in all of them.
Wow.
And this is the first one. And I don't know if I've seen anything of Bergman's after Hour of the Wolf, which was 68. I don't know if I saw any of his 70s output. Or wait, no, I did see Wild Strawberries, which is, I think, somewhere in the 70s. But besides that, I have not really seen his 70s output. And then we talked about this before on the other shows, like sometime around like 1980, he started doing made-for-television movies. Although it's not like it was because he couldn't get funding. Like I don't know if just the cinematic landscape was different over in Europe and Sweden or what, but it wasn't like seen as like some sort of decline or downgrade. It's just he started doing that. Like I'm pretty sure his version of Mozart's The Magic Flute was a made-for-TV movie, came out in like '75 or something like that, and it's considered like just as great as his other work. So I don't know, but anyway, so yeah, I think I've only seen his stuff from like the '50s and '60s, which I guess still covers most of the most famous stuff.
How is Wild Strawberries? I've heard that one's good.
It's good, but even I can find it a bit boring. Like usually I can be pretty patient with like long drawn out dramas. It is good. It makes some, sort of really good points. And he is an interesting character. But yeah, it's one that I can't just throw on. I don't find it nearly as engaging as a movie like this. Like this is a movie that just for whatever reason really grabs me. Like I don't even look away. I think it has a lot to do with the performances. I mean, it's a weird comparison, but I always say when I'm trying to talk about another movie that I like a lot, just for kind of that reason, it's in no way similar or related, is the China Syndrome. I always talk about the China Syndrome, and it's really because of, is it Jack Lemmon? Yeah, right? Jack Lemmon. I just find Jack Lemmon's, like, performance in that just, like, there's something just really earnest about it. Like, that even when he's talking or doing mundane things, I find it just really watchable and interesting anyway. And I kind of feel the same way about this movie, like the way the actresses behave. I don't think stuff was improvised, but I know like certain lines and things were changed as they went along. It was sort of like a developing script. And there were a few things that, particularly, I guess, the whole story about the encounter on the beach, because it was written. I guess it wasn't changed as far as like what's being told. It's just the words that were being used. I think B.B. Anderson had said something like it was very clear that it had been written by a man, and she wanted to like make it sound a bit more natural coming from a female. So she, I guess, punched up the dialogue a bit, something like that.
Well, I mean, assuming the subtitles were correct, I mean, she did a good job with that.
Yeah, and that's the other thing we talked about before too, is when you're redoing a foreign movie in another language, something is always a bit lost. We have to rely on the subtitles, and we realize that. But it's as good as it can be, I think, under those circumstances. I mean, luckily, Swedish is a language that translates pretty well into English. It's not like one of those languages that is full of like really weird things that don't translate. I can't like nothing translates 100%. No language does, but it at least is one of the easier ones. It's not like Thai or something like that.
That's what I was going to say. Some of the Asian languages are like that.
Exactly. Or say like a Middle Eastern type language. There's a lot to it, but I mean, Swedish is sort of in the same ballpark as, something like German and things like that. Even if we listen to it, we can hear some words that sound similar kind of to English words, or sometimes they'll even use what sounds, at least to me, like English words. So yeah. But like you said, yeah, we have to rely on the subtitles as far as that goes. But yeah, B.B. Anderson, Liv Ullmann. So that makes B.B. Anderson is the nurse Alma, and Liv is the actress Elizabeth. So there you go. So I mean, yeah. So essentially, you have one actress who's like giving an almost entirely silent performance, which is another thing that makes the movie kind of unique. And that you have got a main character that has almost no dialogue at all and has to really rely just on facial expressions, which is one of the reasons why she must have gotten the role, because I mean, what a face. And they make good use of it, because like early in the movie, they have that part where after she's introduced and everything, and they leave the room when she's still at the hospital. Remember, she turns over on her side and she just looks at the camera for like a minute. For like 45 seconds, she does not blink. Like I remember the second time I watched, I tried to not blink along with her, and my eyes were killing me. Like, how are you doing this? And then she just sort of blinks and rolls over. But I mean, yeah, just a really memorable face that's capable of conveying a lot of emotion. Again, it's one of these things. Whenever I make a comparison that I haven't seen other people make, I always think it's probably dumb or lame, because I was like, because if it was good, other people would have come up with it. But I'll tell you another thing, and I don't know if it's good or not, and you can just say, oh, it's just another woman with short hair in a black and white movie. But the other actress, B.B. Anderson, she also has an expressive face too, but it reminds me a lot of one of the best silent movies out there, which is The Passion of Joan of Arc, which I think came out in 1925. And a lot of that movie, really relies on like close-ups of the lead actress's face in that, and of course because she's been captured by the English as a prisoner of war, they cut her hair, so the actress has short hair throughout that, and I forget her name. That's Dreyer. I don't know how you say it, but that's a really interesting director, because he was a guy whose career actually spanned silent era, and he did sound pictures afterwards too. But it's still like sort of one of the most famous of the movies of the 20s or the silent era, especially for its visual style. It's very white. For a black and white movie, it's pretty much entirely white. It had all these cool like artificially built sets to like, I don't know, simulate where she is. Like, it doesn't look realistic. It doesn't look like any sort of like 13th or 14th century or whatever it's supposed to be type of castle. It looks artificial, but it really just sort of fits the feel of the movie. Anyway, looking at Alma in this movie, she reminds me a lot of that actress. Although maybe I'm just making a really broad comparison because it's just a black and white movie with a short-haired woman with big expressive eyes, but it does remind me of that. But yeah, I forget Dreyer's name, but he also did the really interesting vampire movie in 1932, Vampire.
Okay.
The movie I rented like 15 years ago. It's kind of one of the lesser-known movies, like when you talk about like sort of the golden age of those Universal movies, you know, Dracula and Frankenstein, stuff like that. This wasn't part of that, but it came out at the same time. Anyway, interesting movie, but yeah, he's an interesting guy. I don't know if we'd ever cover him or not. Like I said, it's weird because his career is like half silent film, half not. Because he made films right up to like I think 1960 or something like that. I'll have to look him up, and I'll say his full name later in the episode as we go along here. But yeah, it reminded me a lot of that.
So let me ask you: when the movie starts, is that a morgue or a hospital?
Right. So I guess, well, I mean, maybe it's the morgue part, because hospitals have their own morgues, right? So, I mean, I think it's supposed to reflect morgue, because I always think that like the boy is supposed to be sort of a representation of like, you know, sort of wishful thinking, like how she had wished her kid had died, and you know the movie's bookended by like shots of this kid. So I mean that seems the clearest to me. That it's probably supposed to be like a morgue, like somebody who's supposedly dead, but you know, like the dead character getting up from the slab.
So you're saying it's just symbolic; it's not actually a dead person, like looking at a screen or whatever.
Well, yeah, I mean, any of those like stuff, like those little blips, I mean, I would say are symbolic. But I mean, you can also make the argument the entire movie is, because you know the movie follows a sort of a narrative that makes a certain amount of sense. But once you get to the halfway point, things get so surrealistic and weird, you start to question what's actually happening and what's not. Right? That's a big part of the movie. And the other thing is like, okay, if we were going to say that like certain parts are imagined by the characters, well, who's imagining which parts? Like, you know, that's not clear. This is one of the most, and this is, you know, why the movie gets talked about so much is like, because Bergman never offered any sort of clarification on it. Like he didn't want to explain it or anything like that. So, you know, ever since this came out, it's one of the more discussed and sort of debated movies as far as figuring out what it really means or what really happened, et cetera, et cetera. And yeah, he didn't want to bring any sort of explanation to it.
Well, I mean, just on the surface, to me, it really plays like a feminist movie. You know, like it's very, very pro female, because it's got, you know, lesbian overtones, and you know talks about the option of not getting married and having children. You know, which is just what women are expected to do, right?
Yeah.
So,
very true.
I mean, for that time period, I think it was kind of probably groundbreaking, I would imagine.
Yeah, to the point that even I think in Sweden originally stuff was edited out and only added in like years later. I think, of course, stuff like the beach scene, talking about that had to go out. And it's funny, when I was thinking about that, isn't it weird that like the other Bergman movie we did also had like a scene where somebody remembers something happening at a beach? Mm-hmm. So remember in Hour of the Wolf, the artist he tells the story of like some time in the past when he was trying to paint on the beach, and he has an altercation with a young boy who keeps like messing with his stuff and annoying him to the point where he actually just like murders him apparently. And it's kind of like the other thing. It's like, well, did that really happen? We don't know. And now we've got another thing. Oh, this time it's not visually shown. It's all goes by the dialogue. We don't actually see anything, because in Hour of the Wolf they do actually show the story he's telling. You see him on the beach. You see the boy. In this, the story, I mean, for kind of obvious reasons, is not shown, and that it wouldn't really be a filmable, thing.
But it does really make you imagine it, in your mind.
Yeah, it's very vivid.
So it's she does a great job of that scene, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's a pretty long. I don't think it cuts at all.
No, I mean, I think the camera might move in and out a little bit, but I don't think there's cuts. I understand why he wanted to call it cinematography, because even though it's not a movie that's like what you think about when you think of cinematography, you usually think of, beautiful landscapes and stuff like that. But I mean, cinematography is everything, right? And there's quite a bit of sort of, I don't want to say camera trickery in this, but there's a lot of sort of different camera techniques being used in the movie. Because there's stuff like, what's that bit, like towards the end when they do the thing where the split face, they accomplish that with like smoke or something, and something to like blur the lens. I don't know, but they used a few interesting techniques just to get some effects going.
You had to be creative back then.
Mm-hmm. Plus, like there's other times too where like the camera's focus seems to not be maybe where you would expect it to be. Like the way other movies are, sometimes, it's like, okay, well, this character's talking. And often when the character's talking, it is right on it. But every once in a while, the camera might drift somewhere else, I don't know, to move focus. But it's definitely interesting. So I understand why maybe he wanted to call it cinematography. But yeah, Persona is a much cooler title and has a lot more to do with the actual content of the movie. Persona being mask in Latin. We already said that, didn't we? Yeah. But yeah, well, as you said, like there is that strong feminist part to it, or even overtones, whatever, of lesbianism. And like I said, if you look on like Wikipedia or something, themes and interpretations, there's a whole section. So it's just like that's one thing, and that's the other thing. So you can, I mean, honestly, you can watch the movie and pick out various themes and have various interpretations, but you can also have different combinations of them. There's very few that contradict each other. There aren't necessarily that many where it'd be like, well, if you think this, then it can't be this. Like a lot of them fit together well too. So it's like, even if like the focus isn't if you think the focus isn't that much on their relationship and it doesn't have sexual overtones, it doesn't really come into conflict with anything you might believe. So again, that's another reason why the movie enjoys the reputation it has and is always discussed, is because it is so open in a way. Like there's just so many different angles to analyze. But yeah, I found the most interesting part of that, it wasn't even necessarily anything sort of exactly overtly sexual, like sexual tension between them or attraction. It was just the way that very quickly they behaved like they were a couple, which is, I guess, really what is what I picked up on, I guess, especially considering like they I don't know if they specify the amount of time they've been at the cabin before they start showing us, because by the time they show us, the narrator has already said that they've been there for at least a little while. He doesn't specifically say the time, I don't think, but he says some of the stuff, how they fell into a routine of doing this and that and the other. So we're sort of picked up in the middle, like, so they're already well established and comfortable by the time, the movie starts showing it, and we see that they're very comfortable together, and they've gotten very used to each other. And Alma is not one of those people that's really worried or intimidated by being with somebody that doesn't talk. In fact, quite the opposite. It encourages her to open up, which I think is a pretty natural reaction, and it's been seen in other movies. Again, kind of a clumsy comparison, but there's a movie that I've talked about with Jay before he hasn't seen, that's I always thought is kind of like in the same sort of vein as movies as like that I famously hate, American Beauty. I always say a good alternative to that is there's this movie that most people hate and think is trashy and shitty, is The Quiet, which I think came out in like 2005, 2006. And because in that, there's a character who's mute too. And very quickly, like, people just start like unloading on her, just telling them all her secrets and stuff, because they liked the idea of being able to talk to somebody that doesn't talk back and is going to tell them there's the whole thing with, I can't remember which Ashmore it is, Sean or Aaron, but it's one of the Ashmores. He's kind of like a popular boy at school, and he's like really popular, but he starts like telling her all this like embarrassing stuff about himself because it just feels good to like tell somebody stuff. He's telling her about like how he masturbates and stuff like that. I don't know, but anyway, yeah. So I've seen that in other stuff too. There's probably other movies, but yeah, it seems to be kind of like a natural thing for a lot of people. It's like if they're dealing with somebody that doesn't talk at all, then it kind of makes them feel like they can confide in them and share intimate things with them, which is very much what happens fairly quickly in this movie. It's interesting too because like it seems like that the doctor at the start, who is also female, has a pretty good idea of what's going on. Like she says like right out to her, it seems to me that what you're doing is, it's just a rejection of your life because of being an actress, and also not just putting on performance as an actress, but like sort of having to put on performance of your own life, right? Like what society expects of you, and this is sort of your way of like not wanting to lie anymore. Like she pretty much kind of nails it all down, if you ask me anyway. But she's like, but I've got a cottage, so I'll send you there, which is not really typically what normal treatment would be. But I guess this doctor's just like, what the hell? I don't mind. You can go stay at my college, and I'll send a nurse to look after you. Kind of a unique situation. And you get the feeling that she wouldn't get this sort of treatment if she wasn't sort of a well-known, famous actress.
So you think that she really is like just not talking, or is it all an act? Because she does send that report back to the doctor, or I mean, even that could have been an act. She knew that it was open and she was going to read it.
Right. That's another thing that gets talked about too, is the idea that like she left it like unsealed to see if Alma would read it. The way it plays to me is like she probably did do that on purpose, but she got more than she bargained for. Because I think her reaction is genuine, like surprise to see just how upset and how it drives Alma. But I do think that was part of it, yeah, that she wanted her to actually read the letter because she wanted to see how she'd react. But then the reaction was a lot more than she was expecting.
Yeah, wow, that's interesting.
Because I mean, and she admits like right what she's doing. Like she says like it's fun to study her, which is something apparently like actors do a lot, and they say writers do too. I don't know. I don't really do it, to tell you the truth, because you'll hear people when they get sort of. I guess it makes a lot more sense with actors, at least. I'm not saying it doesn't make sense with writers, but they'll say, I like to study human beings and human behavior, and just because then I like to use it myself in my work, and it makes it more genuine and stuff. And I get all that, but I mean, from a writer's perspective, personally, for me, no, not as much. It doesn't mean, because I mean, the one thing that like a self-important writer will always tell you is like a big part of my job is observing, observing the world around me. And yes, of course, yes, I do that. But I think I'm less concerned with people than some people are. So that's just me personally. But with an actor, I totally get it, because an actor really, it's performances, characters. So of course, studying people in the world around you makes sense. So I do get that from what Elizabeth says, and it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So that's sort of another angle to it too. So you've got things like, mental health, or like, if it's schizophrenia or whatever, you've got like we said, female attraction, lesbianism or female homosexuality, blah blah. And then also you've got the perspective of like art and the artist, and the way artists view the world and the way they interact with it, etc. So yeah, just a lot of different angles to take it from.
Much like shooting a movie.
Yeah. See, one of the things, and it's mentioned here, I remember too, is I think we talked about this also in Hour of the Wolf, because when I opened this, I said like how, unlike Persona, a lot of his other movies are about sort of bigger, wider, more universal themes. And one of the big ones that got explored in various movies, particularly like The Seventh Seal, is the silence of God. When you think about it, this movie is kind of like a microcosm of that, in that it's just like bringing it down to the individual. And of course, we have an individual who's literally choosing to be silent. I don't know how well that ties in with the religious thing, but I don't know. It did make me think of that, because a lot of his movies were sort of God-centered, and this is the one that seems like it's less so, but then you can see that kind of comparison. Well, Silence of God versus sort of Silence of the Individual, etc. And just looking at some of the background here. So, I mean, a lot of the psychology comes from the works of Carl Jung, or however you say that, which is actually kind of funny because if you were like type persona into Google nowadays, what will probably come up is the famous video game series.
Yeah.
Which is, pretty much has nothing to do with this or at all, except that a lot of stuff in that is also kind of based on the works of Carl Jung. I don't have much experience with the series. It's one of those ones I was meant to get around to that I still haven't, but I will eventually will. It's one of those ones where people seem to argue what the good entry point is. I think a lot of people say Persona 3. I don't know. But I just find that interesting that, for two completely unrelated things at the same title, that they actually do both take a little bit from Carl Jung, which is kind of funny.
Also known as analytical, I think.
Right.
I studied quite a bit of Jung in my university time. And it's all very complicated stuff.
Yeah, it is, but it is kind of refreshing to see it in a movie, because usually when they're going to do a psychological thing, they go the other route. It's like Freud, right? Like everything's based on Freud stuff, which even, people that don't have backgrounds in psychology, or at least tacitly familiar with, some of the symbolism, particularly like sexual stuff, right? That Freud was always Freud talking about phallic symbols or being obsessed with the womb and shit like that. So it's nice to see something that's has sort of a psychological angle that is not Freud, but is, something else. And as you said, Jung is a bit more complicated, for sure, I think, at least on the surface. I'm sure they're equally valid and equally complicated, but you know what I mean. Yeah.
David Cronenberg made a really good film about the time that those two spent together, Freud and Jung, and called A Dangerous Method. It's really good.
I forgot that was Cronenberg.
Keira Knightley's in there, Viggo Mortensen, of course, back again, Vincent Cassel.
Yeah. That's a movie I need to see again because I've only seen it once.
Oh, okay, I didn't realize you'd seen it.
Yeah.
I thought we talked about it before and you hadn't seen it, but
maybe I hadn't then. I don't know.
I recommend that to everyone else.
It's funny, yeah. Yeah, that's part of the third act of Cronenberg's career where he was doing sort of more conventional, straightforward type of things.
And, he does a brilliant job with it. So he's just a talent. Everyone's like, oh, he can only do body horror stuff, but it's not true.
No. Yeah, and we've done 2 of his movies so far, and we'll probably do more because we're both really big fans, and his stuff is just really fun to talk about.
He's my favorite director, so I think we haven't done Dead Ringers yet, have we?
No, but yeah, that's one that we were definitely considering. So that's a good one. A lot of psychology in that one, for sure.
Yeah, man, I watched The Fly a few weeks ago. Sorry to go off topic, but
that's fine.
That's just such a brilliant film. It just blew me away. It's been a while since I'd seen it, but just so well done.
Yeah.
For for what it is,
gross, I mean, something based on like a 50s B movie sci-fi thing, but
they took something that was almost a joke and made it just, you feel the pain that Brundle's going through, and Jeff Goldblum does an amazing job. I was really blown away by how much I love that film when I watched it a few weeks ago. I'm going to watch it again too.
And I know when we've talked about Cronenberg before, I've made the comparison, and again, it's not something I came up with. Other people have sometimes called Cronenberg sort of the Kafka of film, and if The Fly just reminds you so much of that because one of Kafka's most famous stories is the Metamorphosis, which is about a guy that turns into a bug. Although it is pretty different because I mean, in that the Metamorphosis sort of just happens like that, and you just have to deal with it. Whereas it's much more drawn out in The Fly. When The Fly, it's a long sort of journey getting to that point, which makes it all the more sort of gut-wrenching.
Yeah, when he's sitting there and his ear falls off, that's like perfect because that was a genuine reaction from Gina Davis because she wasn't expecting it to happen.
So,
cool. That's when it all just starts, falling apart. He calls his medicine cabinet like the the museum of his body parts or something. Just teeth and ears.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love that movie. And Goldblum, I couldn't imagine anyone else playing that role. I kind of thought about it, when we talked about Bad Lieutenant, and how you couldn't imagine, anyone besides Harvey Keitel playing that role. I kind of feel the same way about The Fly. It wouldn't have been nearly as good without his performance, either one of those films.
Yeah. No, sometimes you just get the right person at the right time.
Lightning in a bottle.
Really well. Yeah, and it works out.
Anyway, back to
because I was thinking about like something like a Bad Lieutenant. It's the type of role where I think you could imagine some other people in it, but but what we said, like it would probably not come across the same way. It would be kind of even more silly. Like Keitel puts sort of this level of humanity and authenticity into it, so that even the over the top stuff, it doesn't feel like, oh, it's an unintentional. It feels genuine and. That where I think like we're talking about like Al Pacino or somebody. I think it would go too far, and it would come across more as silly.
I mean, even Walken, and that was back when Walken was still kind of a serious actor.
Mm-hmm.
That, I mean, he could have done it, and it probably would have been okay, but it wouldn't have been what we got from the. You just feel the pain that the Bad Lieutenant's going through.
Yeah,
we don't even know his character's name, do we? He's just Lieutenant.
Yeah. In regards to this movie, the casting's obviously really good because you need, the good thing about them, you need like to have a certain dynamic between the two, and it is cool how like similar they are. One is obviously a bit younger than the other, but they even talk about it in the movie how like their faces are very similar, and then they of course do that shot at the end, and really there's only one tell at the end that it's two different faces, and that's that their facial structure is almost identical. Just one of them has like a wider nostril than the other. Apart from that, they have like the same facial structure. They have the same sort of, I think, color. I'm not sure because it's black and white. I think they have the same color eyes, but I guess in black and white, everybody's eyes look the same. But still, like sort of the same sort of wide, expressive eyes.
I think Elizabeth has a little bit fuller lips as well, but other than that, they're almost exactly the same.
Yeah. And I mean, you would see that done in some other movies too. What I think about is when I think about some of the stuff that's in this movie, and if you wanted to take some of the more complex stuff that's in this movie and boil it down to make it more of like something popcorn and accessible, it's something like Single White Female, right? Where once again you have two actresses that once you do some haircuts and stuff, they actually do really resemble each other, and it becomes part of the movie. And that movie, like I said, it's a bit less complex. It's just more about obsession and straightforward. They really take that angle. It's funny, some people had even referred to this movie, Persona, as like having elements of psychological horror in it. And it does. It just, they don't go in quite in that direction with it towards the end, whereas that's what something like Single White Female is all about. But yeah, I was thinking about that because it wasn't just the idea of two women and how they interact and one becoming maybe obsessed with the other, but it's also just like, yeah, it's true. Like once again in the casting for that movie, what was it? It was Jennifer Jason Leigh and who's the other one? I cannot remember, but anyway, who I don't think I'd ever thought looked similar until you put them in that movie together, and you're like, yeah, they really do look similar. And then of course the whole thing is she cuts her hair so she looks the same. And
Bridget Fonda,
right? Bridget Fonda was the crazy one, I think, and Jennifer Jason Leigh was the normal one. But maybe
I don't even remember, honestly. Yeah, I couldn't even tell you. I've seen it, but
yeah. But that's one other thing I thought about while watching Persona was like it was kind of like it seemed clear that like that movie was somewhat influenced by Persona, but just sort of in a more simple, kind of straightforward thriller type way.
And in Persona, it's more like an unconscious. Absorbing the personalities and the traits of the person rather than actually trying to steal this person's life, like in Single White Female.
Yeah.
But I've seen that done so many times too.
You can still see this movie possibly going that direction, particularly like it depends on how much you take literally. Like the whole thing with the husband, right? It's hard to that's one of the parts of the movie where you think that can't really have happened because how could he, mistake his wife? That's ridiculous, but it is in that sort of spirit, like the idea of like taking over someone else's life in a way, because it's just like she's talking as if she's heard. She's saying, "Don't worry, tell our son that mommy's coming home." Blah blah blah. It is genuinely disturbing when she starts doing that, whether it's really taking place or not.
Yeah.
because it's I really think it's like sort of the halfway point. What changes is, to me, I mean, everything's a build-up, everything matters, but where things change is the first part that I figure is a dream, which is, I think, when she goes to bed, I think Alma dreams of Elizabeth coming in and them having that weird moment, where she stands up and she holds her face, and then they both look at the camera and break the fourth wall. And then she asks her later the next day, she's like, "Did you come into my room last night?" And she's like, "Huh?" So it seems to me that's probably just something she dreamt, and because it was part of her starting to fall for her or whatever. But and from that point on, you can't trust what you see in the movie, really, like, as far as taking it literally. Anyway, it's like how much is actually happening, how much is in their heads, and as I said, one of the interesting aspects of it, well, who's imagining which parts, and which is all part of the whole same thing, right? Because they're starting to meld together.
Right. Yeah, I'm sure we'll have a lot of discussion on the final act.
Yeah. And also, it's funny because the movie, of course, is fairly subtle in a lot of ways, but in other ways it's not, and that's on purpose. Because, of course, the movie opens with the weird film reel stuff, right? The film reel going off and us seeing various things. And I'm sure you saw the penis at the beginning.
Yeah.
Which I wonder if that's where they got the idea for the joke in
Fight Club, right?
Fight Club, right? Yeah, because the whole thing was like Tyler Durden saying one of his many jobs was he used to have to change the reels at the theater, because back in the day when movies were a certain length, you had to switch the reels, and when you see that weird like bloop thing in the bottom of the screen, sometimes that was the thing. But his joke was he spliced in something, and he'd be like, "Nice big cock," and he's like, if it's so fast that people don't even know it's there. It's almost kind of what happens in this movie right at the beginning. It's like, whoa, did I just see that? Because it's just so quick and out there.
Isn't there actually one in Fight Club somewhere?
Oh yeah, at the very end, it's like the joke. Like, as soon as the movie ends, you get a shot of it.
I mean, I've seen the flicker, and I assume that's what it was, but I never actually went to the trouble of pausing it.
Yeah, it's at the very end, at that very last shot after it faded. You met me at a very interesting point in my life, and the Pixies are playing, the buildings are coming down, and credits are about to roll just before you get that shot. Just the closing joke. But anyway, this movie actually does that, but I think it's just for arty stuff. But anyway, my point is, so you have that opening, the first 5 minutes with stuff like that, and then you get the sort of normal narrative in movie. But then they do use it sort of to symbolize her starting to have like a psychotic break, right? Because after she reads the letter and everything, then the same thing happens. Suddenly it's like the film has stopped and it's gone off the rails and stuff, and so it's not really subtle there, but that's fine. But yeah, for people who haven't seen the movie, I don't know why, because we're discussing everything, but I mean, the thing is, at one point, so they've been staying at this fairly remote cottage by the ocean, but Alma does go into town by car, I guess, to get supplies and stuff. So at one point, she's taking some things for Elizabeth, and one of them is a letter that she's sending back to the doctor, and that's what it is. And in the contents of the letter, she reads a sort of a condescending tone coming from Alma, not Alma, coming from Elizabeth, saying like how it's very sweet how Alma looks after her, but she thinks maybe she's a little smitten with her, and that and then she says something like, it's very interesting studying her. Anyway, that really upsets her, and that's really where the movie starts to turn, because before that she really did seem to be sort of falling in love with her, or if she wasn't falling in love with her, had great admiration for her, saw her as sort of an ideal kind of role model, a slightly older female who's sort of a success story.
Who on the surface has a perfect life, right?
Right, exactly. And yet has come to this weird kind of, like a weird emotional breakdown, I guess is what it is. Just withdrawing from daily life. That has just frozen her in place. But because Alma herself has some similarities, although she's just a nurse, she's not an actress, but she's sort of on the same sort of path that's as we were saying with the feminist angle, sort of expected of women. She's 25, she's got a job, which is, I guess, somewhat modern, but she's engaged, and she's expecting to have kids at some point. There's a part where she's talking to herself. She says, eventually we'll have some kids and I'll raise them because that's what one does.
Right. I mean, and she says, like, what else would one want? I've got it all, essentially. But it's not what she wants.
Right. And towards the end, she uses that as fuel for her attack on Elizabeth, saying, you were living this life as the perfect actress and you had a happy marriage, but of course what's expected of you is the next thing, particularly is that, because it's true too, because even today's society, how much do we all freak out? Oh my God, Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt are having a kid, although they adopt. You know what I mean? We always freak out over celebrities having kids together.
Right.
Or even if it's just one celebrity in this case. It's just it's so much more magical than normal birth. It's if a famous person's going to give birth, right? So it's just like, so that was like the next step, is that you're going to have kids. But then you found out very quickly that that's really not what you wanted at all. That's kind of one of the weirder moments in the movie for me that's hard for me to, because I don't really get why it happens twice.
I was going to ask you about that. I had to rewind it. I thought I did something wrong. I was like, wait, I saw this scene already. Because
in a movie where stuff happens and the whole point is like, did that really happen or was it imagined? It's really weird. I guess it's supposed to really, maybe reinforce the idea of their intertwining psyches, is the idea like she can already guess what she's going to say to her. Because at first it's like she gives the speech and then it like winds back. And it's like, oh, she imagined her saying all this to her. But then it's like, now she's saying the same thing over again. Now it's like, so if you thought the first time was imagined, you'd think the second time. Now it's really happening. So, yeah. So that's one where I really don't necessarily have a theory for that, except I guess, again, just something about how intertwined they've become so that she can predict what she's going to say to her or something like that.
I mean, it is the same, right?
It's almost word for word. It is a different scene. It's the actress doing it again. It's not, they don't just replay it, but it
is. Okay. Yeah. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, I just watched it, so I know. So it's the actress doing it again. It's a second take or whatever, and some of the wording is slightly different in the inflections, but I mean, otherwise, it's almost exactly.
I don't want to say anything negative here, but it's this is a fairly short film. It's like 80-something minutes.
Yeah,
and I don't know, to add like an extra, like a 5-10 minute scene, whatever that was. I mean, it almost seems like it's padding. Because I feel like it's really not necessary. Like, we get the point, I think. I mean, I really think it could have been. The point was, like you said, just to show you that their, consciousness is shared or whatever. I mean, I think you could have, conveyed that a different way. Rather than just repeating the same thing.
Yeah, it's the one moment in the movie where I'm more confused than entertained.
That may be the intention.
And that's true too. Because as I said, I find like most of the stuff really was interesting and works. I don't want to say it doesn't work. I'm just saying I'm kind of the same way as you. It felt like unnecessary, like you said.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to. I'm sure he had a purpose for putting it in there, but it almost feels sloppy to me. Not to, say anything negative about this movie, but it just seems it just is an odd choice.
Yeah,
maybe just to get this thing to feature length. I don't know.
Yeah, you wonder, and then you think that originally stuff was cut out of the movie too. So,
right.
They'd really need it. They'd really need it then if certain things were cut. Any of the more risque bits, which I guess would mostly be the beach story.
Man, I was hoping you'd have. More to enlighten me with as far as to why he did that, because I was confused too.
The repeating, it's sort of the one bit in the movie that that doesn't really work for me either. Honestly, it's kind of the same way where I'm just like, because I was just like, it seems to undo what I thought was initially happening, because it's just like, okay, she's imagined this, and now it's like, I don't know. Yeah, so I have sort of the same issue with it as you do, to tell you the truth.
The first time it happened, I was like, oh, crap, did I hit the remote or something? And then I actually rewound it, so I watched that scene twice the first time I saw it. Or actually, I told you before we started, I'd actually seen this before. It's just been a while back. I'd forgotten I'd seen it. I'd forgotten.
See, that was funny. I'd seen the movie before, too, although it's been a few years, but I remember it pretty well. But that's the bit I forgot, too. I forgot that speech is repeated. I was just like, what?
Wait, I was like, maybe the picture was not torn the second time, and I was like, no, looks like the same thing.
I mean, it's funny because earlier in the movie, because like we said, especially that whole thing with the real screwing up and stuff like that, it's kind of like a fake out for the audience, especially if you were an audience back then, because that's what movies looked like. It's like something's gone wrong with the picture, you know. I almost feel like maybe he's doing that again, where it's just like it's some sort of weird like skip or something, like some technical problem. So that's one part that I didn't even notice the first time I watched it until I read and I saw it again. Is like, you know how it didn't seem to serve any purpose that Hour of the Wolf opened with a black screen, but we had audio of the film crew all setting up and getting the shot ready.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this movie has a little bit of that too, because at the very end, when Alma leaves and goes on that bus, you see that she's being filmed by the film crew. It's very quick. I think I missed it the first time, but yeah, suddenly there's the shot of like somebody with a camera like panning in on her and a couple crew members, and then it shows her getting onto the bus. It's like he really likes that idea of sort of breaking the reality.
It's like meta. It reminded me a lot of Day for Night.
Right, which is another movie we did in that series, the French movie.
Just the concept was kind of familiar.
Yeah. That's a movie about making a movie.
So that's what I was going to ask you. Like, what? So what does that mean? You know, I mean, like the film crew at the end. I mean,
see, I think that's less to do with the movie itself and more just sort of something that like Bergman likes to insert in movies, to tell you the truth. Because I mean, the whole idea of because a lot of the times when you watch movies, the whole idea, of course, is to immerse the viewer so that you don't think about it being a movie, you know, right? And yet Bergman seems to always want to like go against that, because another reason why like the movie's bookended the way it is kind of to like remind you that you're just watching something artificial that's a film. That's why he bookends it with, you know, these weird little film bits and the little shots of animation and stuff like that. The whole point is sort of make you doubt the reality of everything. So I feel like that just is part of it. It's almost like a signature of his. It's not like he does it in every movie, but he's done it in a few movies.
Yeah. And it's all through this thing too. You know, constantly reminding you that it's a film.
Right. You've got fourth wall breaking.
Right.
And I think that was another reason when I was talking earlier about how sometimes the camera's focus seems not where you'd expect it to be in a normal film. I think that's part of it too.
Mm-hmm.
So it's weird because like a lot of films, the whole point is like to give you this, you know, sense of being drawn into another reality. Whereas this, they're kind of trying to go out of their way to point out that we're watching a false reality.
Right.
So I mean, I get that. I mean, if you the furthest you can really take that whole thing is that like Elizabeth isn't even real and Alma is.
Right.
Like Alma's like just sort of imagined Elizabeth as this sort of, I don't know, character in her life that is helping her overcome her own problems and her own insecurities about getting married. Because we know, you know, she says early on, like, I'm faithful to him. Then you find out, well, no, there was at least one time she wasn't faithful to him. And you also find out before she got engaged and I guess got involved with this guy, she actually had an affair with a married man for like 5 years. So she's 25 now. So she had to have been pretty young when that affair started. And she was obviously, and she said she was in love with this guy. It wasn't just going around. She said, but he got bored and left. So that's one of the first things she confides in Elizabeth as she talks about that. So yeah, there's several times where she sort of, from what we've seen, contradicts herself, which is something everybody really does. It's another thing about like delusion and lying to yourself, which is something literally everybody does. You don't necessarily have to have mental issues to do that. But speaking of mental issues, this is another thing I thought about. Maybe it's just me overthinking terms, but I was thinking about like how, you know, people are described as mentally unstable, and then sometimes people are described as emotionally fragile. And a lot of the times they intersect, but I do believe they're different things. Like, don't you? I think it's pretty often where somebody's both, but I think you could be one and not the other. Because I don't necessarily think of Alma as mentally unstable.
She definitely doesn't give you anything.
Emotionally fragile is more how I think of her. And I realize you could say you're splitting hairs here. You're just using two different terms for the same thing. But I really do think there's a difference, even if there's a small difference.
She doesn't give you any reason to think she's mentally unstable. Real
Well,
well.
she has one moment where it seems like she's going to hurl a pot of boiling water on her patient, right?
I think that she wasn't going to do it though. But isn't that the only time that Elizabeth speaks in the whole movie?
Well, see, that's what makes me think she was going to do it. That it
You
took
think so?
that to stop her, right? Like, that would have been the only thing that stopped her. Like, if she didn't get that, because that's what she wanted her to speak. And isn't it tricky the way they move the camera on that?
Mm-hmm.
The camera pans from, it does a sort of a close-up on the water and her grabbing it. And the camera very quickly, of course, moves to Elizabeth for the shot, but not quickly enough to catch up with her words. So by the time the camera's on her face, she's already said it. So we've heard her speak, but it's almost like it didn't count because we don't see her lips move or anything, right? That had to be on purpose. I thought
Had to have been.
I thought about that a lot today, almost to make it seem like maybe she didn't say it, but she says, so what makes you think, right, I just answered my own fucking question. She wasn't going to do it. Elizabeth didn't speak. But in Alma's mind, she spoke, and that's what stopped her.
I mean, I don't know. I totally see that. But I mean, I was going to say, we mentioned Fight Club earlier. That spoilers for Fight Club if you haven't seen it. But maybe it's just another personality or another personality. That she's not there at all. She's just sitting there in a cottage talking to herself.
You mean Alma?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Alma's kind of the main focus of the film, right?
I think so. Which is another thing that sort of plays to your expectations, because when the movie starts, you probably think it's going to be the other way around. You have this actress who's got this reputation in life and everything, and now this very odd thing has happened. She's just stopped talking and withdrawn from her life and won't talk to anybody. But yeah, it flips, and the focus seems to be more on Alma, which makes a bit sense because she's the one that does all the talking after all, and she starts opening up and talking about her own life and insecurities, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, I don't think of her as mentally unstable. I think of her as emotionally fragile, and if you want me to tell you the difference, I always think like a mentally unstable person doesn't necessarily need emotional triggers.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like a mentally unstable person, and again, it's just my own definition. It's not any sort of term because the opposite can be true too. So I don't know, but I just mean to me, like, if I'm going to point out the difference, to me, like a mentally unstable person is capable of like having like an episode or some sort of really weird thing, whether it's really something crazy and antisocial like committing a crime or something. I feel like they're capable of that without necessarily any sort of direct stimulus. It's like they're just capable of creating it themselves, like especially people that are like not in touch with reality, right? They imagine things, they have delusions, they have hallucinations, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas I feel like emotionally fragile person needs to be triggered by something. But maybe you could just say, well, it's still the same thing. I don't know, but that's kind of how I feel. And that's why I think that I feel like Alma could have gone through her life and lived a fairly happy life. Obviously, she had her problems, but it took the encounter with Elizabeth to bring it all out, I guess is kind of what I mean. Like, obviously, Alma's not well and she's messed up, but I feel like she was a together enough person where she probably would have been fine if she hadn't encountered this other person. But
yeah, I mean, it almost seems to me like it's her way of working out what she wants out of life, and her coming to the grips with, I don't want that. I don't want to just get married and have babies. That's not what I want for my life. So, maybe she's just imagining, maybe this patient came in, and then from there on, it's all in her mind.
Right. She projects this idea of an ideal type of woman.
Right.
But it's a woman who, like, having a kid, like, messed up her life completely.
Yeah.
Especially coming into terms with, like, what most people consider sort of the ultimate sin. You have a kid and you don't love him. You're supposed to love him. People talk about being attached. Well, and that's something that's, part of, like, a postpartum thing, right? That just happens. Usually it's a temporary thing, but it is something that happens, right? Women give birth and they have sort of the opposite reaction. Instead of being happy and loving the kid, it's more like they're kind of repulsed by it. And usually that is a temporary thing, but yeah. I guess not always.
I got maybe a symptom of postpartum, not depression, but psychosis, which is, I think, common, like in like 5% of women or something.
Yeah.
But,
I learned about that in the last couple of years.
another aspect of a feminist here is abortion. Alma has an abortion after the beach incident, and then Elizabeth tries to give herself an abortion with the hanger, I believe.
She says that Elizabeth had tried. Yeah, that she had several unsuccessful self-abortion attempts.
Which is,
so again, very touchy issues, especially in 1966, right?
Yeah.
Some very touchy issues.
The boy was born and she just hated it. Wow. Yeah. Terrible.
But it is something that does happen.
Yeah. Well, let's jump back to what happened on the beach, because I think that's really, that's the moment that sticks out to me the most in the film. Not only does she do a great job, acting that scene, and it's just her by herself, basically a monologue, basically.
Right. It's one of the few times where they don't really show much of Elizabeth's reaction. It really just keeps the focus on Alma.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty wild, though, isn't it? If it had been reversed, like roles had been reversed, it would be totally, not acceptable.
Right. Even it's still pretty not acceptable.
Right.
But maybe for different reasons.
Right.
Because back then it probably would have been more like, obviously it was inappropriate and improper, but it wouldn't have seen them as victimizing anybody.
Mm-hmm. When it clearly is.
It is. I guess I'm not going to get into that. I have my own thoughts.
Yeah.
I have my own thoughts on that.
You know what I'm saying, though.
I totally.
The gender roles. Yeah,
I know.
It's
for sure. That's what we're talking about.
Just because
we're talking about a sexual encounter with two underage boys.
Right.
That's what we're talking about. What I always wonder about in that story is, again, how reliable she is as a narrator. Was there even another girl? Right. Because in the story, the whole thing that starts it is the other girl initiates it. Maybe she made up the other girl because she couldn't admit that she initiated it. Although I don't know, because she's pretty free about how enthusiastic she was about it, and she says, it was better than any other sex I've had before or since in my life. Which is, you understand how you would have a lot of weird, complex feelings and guilt about something like that.
Sure.
She's like, I'm with my husband, who I love. I'm going to get married, and yet I'm not feeling as fulfilled as what I did there. But that's one I think, again, we can understand. Even people who condemn it morally, I think, can understand it, because there's an element of danger to it, and there's an element of just spontaneity and passion and things that I think that's another thing that gets beaten out of women if we're talking about feminism. It's men are supposed to be sexually adventurous, but women are just supposed to be sexually, dutiful and available, right? So I think that's another thing that made it very forward thinking for a 1966 film, because the only point of the scene was really sexual gratification and excitement. There wasn't any sort of emotional component to it, and usually, it's the other way around. It's that's the type of thing men seek out, not women. Right, so.
We kind of have the same, opinion of that now. A woman that has a lot of sexual encounters is considered a slut, but a man that does it is considered a virile, strong,
stud, a cool guy.
Yeah.
So the double standard even exists today in a much more supposedly open-minded climate. So again, you see just how bold this movie was in dealing with such subject matter, and I think in a somewhat realistic way too, because they really go through how that makes her feel and act afterwards. Because as I said, she's saying at the beginning, I'm going to marry the guy. He has two names for some reason, Carl something.
Yeah. It's
Carl Henrik or Henrik Carl or something like that. It's both of them. She's like, I'm going to marry him. We'll have kids. We get along together and everything like that. And when she's telling Elizabeth about it, she's like, I'm faithful to him. It's at least once you weren't.
Yeah.
But it's part of convincing yourself and telling a lie. But then, it's really important to her to tell the story. She says later that it was because, she felt so comfortable and because she'd had a lot to drink.
Right.
But and that's what people do. We say, well, I wouldn't have normally said that, but
when she's recounting her story, she's reminiscing. it doesn't really seem like she has any guilt. It seems like she, remembers it fondly. And that, I don't know that she made Katrina up only because at one point the other boy comes over and Katrina starts having sex with that boy. And then the one that she had just had sex with is ready to go again.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, she could have made the entire thing up for all I know, but
Yeah.
She has lost her credibility as a narrator, you said.
Right. Yeah, I think she has. But yeah, but as soon as I answered myself, I felt like I'd negated the point because I thought, yeah, maybe she made up the other girl because she didn't want to admit that she initiated. But considering how things unfolded after that and how candid she was about it, that doesn't seem likely because it seems to defeat the purpose. So I can accept that there was another girl. In fact, having another girl that does make it all the more exciting. Even if she and the girl didn't have sexual contact together, they still use the term later in the movie orgy, which I guess it is. I mean, it's maybe the minimalist. It's like the least people you can have for an orgy, probably, but it qualifies.
Yeah, I guess. I don't want to split hairs there.
Well, I'm just saying, if a threesome is not an orgy, right?
Is it not? I don't know.
Well, I mean, that's why the terms exist.
4 makes an orgy?
I think so. I would think 4 is what makes the orgy.
I know that I learned this recently. Gangbang, I think, is 5 guys and 1 girl. It's got to be at least 5.
I didn't know that.
I didn't either. You would think 2 could be a gangbang, right? Or,
I would have thought 3, I guess. If I think about it. Because,
all right, Urban Dictionary.
Probably not the right show for us to be talking about this because we were talking about like some porn stuff. I think on our live commentary not too long ago.
Well, so, I mean, I think it kind of relates to what we're talking about here, at least.
Okay, well, in a way, but I'll just say the way I would have thought of why 3 would make a gangbang is because. Usually if it's what do they call it? MMF, right? 2 males, 1 female scene. You always have a point where they're at like both ends of her, right?
The Eiffel Tower.
Right? One end is engaged and the other end is engaged. But if there's a third, there's not necessarily a logical place for it.
Well,
however, I was going to say, I had somewhat recently come upon a really old one from the 80s with Tracy Lords. Where Tracy, and it was like a long movie, but it was condensed into just like, I think the sex scenes, right? And there's a part towards the end where Tracy Lords has sex with 3 guys. And they solved that problem. Because they had the conventional 1 guy at one end and the other, but they had the other guy in the middle because there wasn't another place to go. I'd never seen it before, but he was another guy on her chest, we'll say. All 3. And I was like, I've never seen that. I don't even think I've ever thought of that, and I'm depraved as hell. But I guess that's why I would have thought 3 makes the gang. You can't say a gang of 2, right? A gang, just like a group of 3, but not a group of 2. So a gang of 3. So I would have thought 3. But if it's 5, I guess that makes sense because in the world of porn, everything is big and everything is exaggerated. So yeah.
By contrast, 3 people engaged in sex is normally referred to as a threesome, and 4 people are normally referred to as a foursome. Yeah. Gangbangs also differ from group sex. Okay, blah, blah, blah.
That's true, because the term foursome does exist, right? Like, you do see it come up. And you're right, you never hear fivesome. So maybe 5 is where the cutoff is. It's funny, I didn't think I could still be learning things about porn at my age and my experience, and yet I'm still learning.
I was listening to a podcast, and they had a porn star on, and they made this distinction, and they didn't know either. So it's pretty funny. But, okay, gangbangs are not defined by the precise number of participants, but usually involve more than 3 people and may involve a dozen or more. When the gangbang is organized specifically to culminate with the near simultaneously of rapid serial ejaculations of all male participants on the central man or woman, it may then be referred to by the Japanese term bukkake. Right,
because there's coming one at a time, but then there's that. Everybody at the same time. That's one I avoid. Like I said, I'm depraved as fuck. I've watched a lot of porn, but that's not one that I want to see. It's not a.
Oh yeah, well me either. We got to answer the important questions here on the Pocket Dimension, guys.
Right. So anyway, I guess it's fine that they use the term orgy for the beach thing. Although I guess because of our depraved world and porn and stuff, it feels all a little conservative for an orgy. Was my point. I was like, to me, it's the minimum requirements for an orgy because it was 4 people.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's an orgy only because this is 2 people or 4 people having sex just in the same location. They're not having sex with each other per se.
Right. Because like 2 couples not engaging with each other. But in this, there is some cross action, although not much.
Yeah.
But in the way she tells the story, she only engages with one boy, but the other girl engages with both. And she also says at one point when, the guy first enters her and she's having sex, she says the other girl, before the other boy comes down, because he's just watching at this point, he says like the girl is like holding him from behind and pushing him, which I have seen. I've seen that done. Not in person. I haven't seen that in person, but I've seen that in pornographic videos.
Let me delete my search history here.
Oh my God. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of amazing. Like, that we can get there from this movie, but it's truth. It's not like we just pulled this stuff out of thin air. This is in the movie. So again, very, very explicit stuff to be talked about in a mainstream movie from the 60s, foreign or not.
Right.
But,
very.
But yeah, and that's really where you do sort of start to really get a good sense of Alma's character and what she's like. I'm going to sneeze, so you can cover that in a second.
You really change you form your opinions of Alma after that scene.
Because I mean, it doesn't seem like there's any sort of gradual lead up. It's just boom, she's about to confess something very scandalous and fallacious.
I mean, what if it was a man who's just like, yeah, one time I raped a couple little girls. It's essentially
Yeah, well, I guess it's all how you word it, isn't it?
They wanted it, though.
It's all how you word it.
I engaged in mutual
coitus.
We all signed release forms beforehand.
Yeah. But yeah, like we said, another double standard that exists to this day.
Exactly.
How people will take that. Just like, I don't want to go on this, but the really common one about like the teacher that has sex with the kid. It's always viewed completely differently if it's a female teacher or a male teacher.
I mean, as a man, I get both sides of the argument. As if you were a young man or young boy, whatever, or post pubescent, you would probably be okay with it. Yeah. Whereas, but I mean, young women do the same thing. It's not like they didn't want it. In certain circumstances.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't want to go into it because a lot of people don't like it, but yeah, that's how I feel too. I feel like at a certain age, people know what they're doing. I'm not saying it's right or anything, and I'm not saying it absolves an adult of guilt or anything like that. But yeah, this is funny. It's funny. I remember talking to you about John Doerr. The first time I saw his newest show, one of the problems, because it's something like Questions with John Doerr, and it's about how he tries to solve like problems in society, and one of them was teachers fucking students. So he actually interviewed a guy, and it's probably about as vanilla as the situation can get, because it was a boy and he was 17, so pretty close, right? But it was about how when he tells the story how he was 17 and he had sex with this teacher, and it's pretty funny because it's comedy, but John does ask him some poignant questions about it and stuff like that, because he does ask him like if he felt like you were taking advantage of a victim, and he did say yes. And I get it, but it felt more like he was just coached to say that after the fact, because several times what the stuff he was saying was total brags, including one big line. Because the first one, now I realized, John asked him what she looked like. He did ask what she looked like, and he was very happy to say, like, did you remember what Sandra Bullock looked like in Speed? She looked a lot like that, and she had the same haircut. So that felt like a bit of a brag. But the other big brag was when he asked them, and he said, how he wound up at her house and they started to engage and stuff like that. Like, he threw in a detail that was not asked for or necessary. It was a total brag. He said both holes. Don't tell me. And then she made me do it. That's you saying, yeah, I did both. I got it done. So, total brag. So don't play the victim card to me, buddy. But anyway.
Is this high school?
I guess he would have been high school if he was 17.
Oh, yeah. That's a little bit more disturbing than college age child.
Well, I mean, you're not really a child when you're in college.
Well, right. Well, I guess legal adult. Yeah.
Right.
Still frowned upon by the university itself.
Yeah, I agree with like teachers getting fired over it, but I don't always agree with the jail time thing. But we're not going to go into all that messy stuff. Like I said, nobody needs to hear me talk about age of consent and stuff like that. But I mean, we have to live in a society, and we have to make up rules and laws, and they're not going to be perfect. And we've decided that 18 is the age. Whether that makes sense or not, that's what we're going with. It makes a certain amount of sense, sure. Because, I mean, the fact of the matter is there's people younger than 18 that are more mature, and there are people that are, like, full adults, and they're not ready, for things like sex either. But there's no law to protect them because that's just how it goes, right? So I get it. We have to have an age somewhere. 18 is what we've decided, and that's what we're going with. And I guess it mostly works, Nothing's going to be perfect.
As far as a, professor goes, with a legal adult, I think it's more of a matter of, abuse of authority than the actual sex act itself, because that's a legal.
Right. And like I said, and I would agree with like firing them.
Yeah.
Because it's just inappropriate. Even just like not abuse of authority. I mean, let's say they become like boyfriend, girlfriend, and and it's perfectly healthy. It still shouldn't have come from this situation, Yeah. So I realize a lot of people are going to say you're jumping over the really big issue, but I mean that's just how I feel. I don't know. I'm not going to change my opinions now. I don't care, and it has little to do with what I do anyway. I'm not a professor. I don't have young students to lust after.
Unfortunately.
I know, unfortunately. Like I said, if this stuff ever applied to my actual life, then maybe I'd have different opinions on it. But since it doesn't,
Oh yeah, I know nothing about other than just what I've read. And like there was a Saved by the Bell one time where Kelly was sleeping with her professor.
Wow, really? That's pretty edgy for Saved by the Bell. Well, the college years, right?
Yeah, the college years. She was dating the professor.
Yeah.
Before Zach and Kelly got back together.
I think I remember that, which is weird because I didn't think I watched the college years, but I somehow remember that. Maybe I just had a conversation. Maybe somebody told me about it.
Yeah, I think the teacher had a weird mullet. As you would in the early 90s, whenever that was.
Yeah, I guess mid 90s. So that Kelly was in it. Was Zach in it?
Yeah.
Some of them were missing.
Kelly was not in it at first, and then she came. I think it was Lisa, and then some new girls, and then Kelly showed up like maybe halfway through the first season.
Screech must have been there. There's no way.
Screech and Mario were there.
Were they?
Slater, yeah.
I thought they were missing like more important characters. So they were only missing
Jesse.
That's weird.
I think Jesse's the only one that wasn't in there
because she had to go do
porn.
She had to go do Showgirls.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that I'm right about that. I mean, I've seen it more than I'd like to admit.
Was the principal on it?
No.
Okay.
See, if you remember at that time, they tried to reboot the whole thing, and the only that may have been after the college years because Screech was on. It was Screech and Belding. They were the only two characters that came back, and I don't think that lasted very long.
But where was that set?
In Bayside.
Okay, see, at least that makes sense. The one thing I'll say, even though it's kind of pathetic still having Belding, is like, did you ever watch Boy Meets World?
Yeah.
Well, remember his teacher, Mr. Feeney? That guy followed him for his entire life.
Yeah, that's
weird. He was like his seventh grade teacher. Then he was like his eighth grade teacher. Then he was in his high school teacher for some reason. Then he was a college professor at the college he went to. It's like, oh my God, you're obsessed with this guy. You want to talk about inappropriate relationship? It's like you're fixating on this boy, and you're like, I have to be his teacher. Wherever he goes, I'm his teacher. Oh my God.
One of those suspension of disbelief.
But yeah, I had a bigger crush on Topanga from that show than like anybody on Saved by the Bell. She was one of my 90s crushes.
Oh, yeah.
Topanga. Loved her.
But yeah, they were all on there. They just added two other female characters, Alex and Leslie.
Wasn't one of them like kind of tough or something? Like kind of a cool, tough girl? Or no, that's one of the movies, isn't it? There's like one of the movies where like Zach gets involved with a girl and she's kind of like tough, like leather jacket and edgy.
Oh yeah, that's
Might be the Hawaiian movie or something.
Tori.
Yes. Why do I
Yeah.
remember that? Jesus.
That was only for like one season too.
And yet I remember it.
But no, Lisa's not in this show, but everyone else I said is.
Yeah.
Lisa went on to do nothing, maybe some TV movies.
Lisa was the black one that Screech was in love with. Yeah.
Lark Voorhees.
I hate the name Voorhees.
It just stands out for obvious reasons.
Yeah. There's a place in New Jersey called Voorhees, New Jersey. It sounds like the worst place on earth. I don't know. I'm very particular about names. Just some names really bother me, and that's one of them. If my name was Voorhees, I would change it.
Wasn't the first Friday the 13th in New Jersey?
Oh, maybe. I don't know. But I just mean it's not association with the movie. If I had a last name that was like a horror movie, I would think that was cool. Yeah. I just hate the name Voorhees. Like, I literally would change my name as Voorhees. Not because it makes you think of Jason Voorhees or whatever. I just think it's an awful name. But anyway.
Cole Loomis.
Yeah, I was going to say, if my name was like Loomis, that was what I was literally going to pick up.
Oh, wow, that's crazy.
Well, I mean, that's the name that gets bounced around the most, right? It was originally in Psycho, and then they put it in Halloween, and then they brought it back in Scream. It's the one that's gotten around the most.
Or Cole Strode.
Yeah, so yeah, I would think that was cool. Would be cool.
Yeah, it's not a bad name.
I just hate the name Voorhees. There's some names. Just like I said, I think the worst male name in the history of male first names is Jorge.
Yeah.
Like Jorge Masvidal. Yeah, I know it means George, but it sounds like Jorge. I think it's awful. Like Jorge Masvidal, he's one of the most popular fighters now. He's cool, but I cringe every time I hear that name. Jorge. Ugh.
And what's his?
I'd rather be named Wang than Jorge, and that's a name. That's a male name. Like if you're from Vietnam or wherever.
What's going on with him? Isn't he in contract disputes or something right now?
Oh, maybe.
Because did he lose his last fight? Or did he win? I'm not even sure.
Yeah, he must have lost.
I think he may have lost.
Is he a middleweight?
I'm not sure.
Is he a middleweight or is he a welterweight?
Welterweight.
Yeah, because I mean he was getting close to the title, and I mean Usman has the title.
Usman beat him, I think.
Okay, he must have fought the title against Usman. And Usman beat him.
And Usman laid on top of him for 5 rounds. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah.
About the least entertaining fighter.
Yeah. The only thing I like about Usman is that he broke that asshole's jaw when they fought.
Colby
Covington? Yeah, who's like the biggest asshole in the sport.
Yeah, he stepped in less than a week's notice to face Usman. Yeah, Gilbert Burns tested positive for COVID-19.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the next fight. Is that they're going to redo it, and Usman's going to fight Burns, and I don't care. Burns is boring too. It won't be good. It won't be a good fight.
It went to decision though. It wasn't Again, he probably just laid on top of it. I didn't see that fight, but he probably
it went to decision. But I mean, he beat him fairly soundly, and he did break his jaw in the fight. But no, he didn't finish him, which would have been satisfying.
Yeah.
I just hate Covington. I don't like Usman because he's boring, like you said.
I mean, I like Usman as a person. I don't like him as a fighter, just because his style is boring.
I don't dislike him. I don't hope for him to lose exactly, but yeah, I'm just not interested in watching him fight. And it's unfortunate that he's champ because he's.
I like the guy a lot, and I watched The Ultimate Fighter the season he was on, where it was.
I didn't. He was on
American Top Team versus another team in Florida.
Black Zillions.
That's it. Yeah, Black Zillions. And, Usman was for the Black Zillions. And I don't know. I just felt like the American Top Team were a bunch of pompous assholes.
They've had a lot of internal strife over the years, so I can believe that. Because every time you turn around, you hear about guys that used to be on the team that left, and now they're feuding. So
I think that's where Poirier is right now.
Yeah. Well, Poirier is going to fight McGregor. They fought years ago.
Is that tomorrow?
No, tomorrow's something dull.
I definitely want to. I'm actually pay for that fight.
I think the big fight tomorrow is just the flyweight thing, which, is just vacant because what's his name retired.
Oh, Henry. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Whatever his name is.
So or maybe it's not vacant. Maybe I think they already had that fight. Yeah, they already had a vacant fight, and Figueroa or whatever his name is, he's the champ, and now somebody's fighting him. But I don't know. No one cares. I mean, that so everybody says like how disinterested people are in that division. Well, Cejudo was like the one thing keeping it alive, and now he's gone.
Cejudo, yeah.
I mean,
yeah, Cejudo retired, and like the next week I see him smoking weed on the Joe Rogan show. I'm like, okay, I guess you're actually retired.
He's earned it. I mean, he was an Olympic gold medalist, and
sure,
did everything he set out to do. And he also, he got the bantamweight belt too.
Yeah,
knocked out TJ.
And when TJ was dosing, it makes you wonder.
Yeah, I don't. Whatever the fights are tomorrow, I don't think I'm even going to watch.
It makes you wonder if TJ had been dosing his entire career.
Yeah. The weird thing is like how TJ's career trajectory ran into the guy he took it from, because the guy he took it from was on like a 34 unbeaten streak, and now I think he's been cut by the UFC. He was so bad.
That was
Henan Barao.
Yeah, Barao.
Henan Barao was like a guy that was definitely going to be a Hall of Famer, and then he lost to TJ, but then he beat somebody else to get right back into title contention. Lost to TJ again, like even worse.
Huge upsets.
And then after that, like just like the biggest decline I've ever seen from a guy that I've ever seen from a guy that was a champion. I don't even know if he's in the UFC anymore. If he is, like he was fighting on the prelims against nobodies and losing. That's like the past like 5 years of his career, and then Barao, and then TJ. Yeah. Anyway, I can go on about that forever, but because I've been getting back into that a little bit after slacking off, but I'm really not interested in whatever tomorrow's card is. I know that the big news about that is Mike Perry, who shouldn't he like be in jail for all the stuff he's done, but for some reason he's supposed to be fighting tomorrow. He missed weight by like a bunch today.
Really? He's gonna get cut, man.
He missed weight by like 6 pounds or something crazy.
That's stupid.
He shouldn't be fighting. He should be in jail, or he should be getting like mental treatment or something. See the video of like where he got kicked out of the bar and he's yelling at everybody and calling them all N-words? They're all white people. They're all white people.
That's even better.
And there's a whole thing about like his girlfriend came out and talked about all the abuse and stuff, and it was weird too because she was saying like she thinks he is a good person. She doesn't want to wreck his life. I'm like, why do you think he's a good person if he did all this?
He's from Flint, Michigan. May explain it.
Drank too much of the water. Went to his brain.
Yeah. So are they doing a catch weight, or is it just it's off?
I have no idea. I don't know how much you're allowed to miss and still fight, because you're allowed to miss a certain amount, and what it means is if it was a title fight and you win, you can't win it. And if it's just a normal fight, you forfeit a certain amount of your salary and the other fighter gets it.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I'll have to look it up.
Still, though, you said 6 pounds? That's a lot.
Like a lot. Like it was like 5.5 or 6 pounds or something like that.
Because they already give you a pound, right?
Yeah, like you can, yeah. He was way over.
Which is a lot for a person fighting at this level, like the highest level. That's a big screw up.
Platinum Mike Perry.
Man, that's a stupid name.
There's so many stupid names. Still, like the great amazing champ right now has like the dumbest name. Like even a nerd like me doesn't like the last style bender.
No, come on, I got to give it to him. He owns it though. It is stupid, but he fully owns that.
I suppose.
He just really likes anime, man.
Yeah, I guess.
His full back.
He was in New Zealand going to. I remember they followed him around the camera. He was in New Zealand. He went to a comic book store to buy comics. But I mean, I'm not going to call him a poser or anything. But I just mean he didn't seem to know anything. He had like a million questions for the comic guy, which is fine. I mean, everybody has to start somewhere and learn. So maybe he's learning. But I don't
I mean,
know.
if he's genuine, I'm cool with it.
He was asking about Suicide Squad comics stuff, which is fine.
Yeah, it does seem kind of.
He is an amazing fighter, though. I'm getting a little tired of people saying like that he's overrated or whatever. Like he's beaten everybody that's put in front of him, and the only boring fight he had was the one with the Cuban guy, Romero.
I mean, he had 2
Romero was
fights go to
terrible.
decision. Sorry, go ahead.
The rest of the time, he knocks people out.
Yeah, he had 2 fights in a row go to decision, and then they were saying he was overrated. Like, man, fuck you.
I mean, the Romero fight was an embarrassment, but Romero should be embarrassed too. All they did was like stare at each other for 15 minutes doing nothing. But I mean, that happens.
Yeah.
Almost every great fighter has had a fight like that. Anderson Silva had a fight like that. He just retired after finally.
He did retire?
Well, actually, he didn't necessarily retire, but the UFC cut him.
Oh, wow. Guess that's it then.
I mean, he's just another guy that hung on way too long.
Yep. He hasn't been the same since he got his leg broken.
Right. So the first 7 years of his career, amazing. The last 7 years of his career, bad.
I mean, he hasn't even won any fights, has he, since then?
Oh, he might have won like one.
Well,
He took weird fights, though, too. I'll give him credit. Like, he was taking fights on short notice and weird opponents. Remember at one point I don't remember if he moved up to light heavyweight, but he fought Cormier a few years ago, remember?
whoa. Oh, I'd forgotten about that.
It was lose-lose for both of them. He couldn't possibly beat Cormier, but Cormier knew that, like, even though he was older and stuff, he couldn't, like, risk letting him strike. So Cormier just sort of, like, laid on him using his wrestling and beat him the safe way. So, I mean, they both came out of it looking dumb. It was like, why make that matchup in the first place? But I think part of it had to do with, like, Silva just wants to fight various people, so you didn't say no to him at the time. Anyway, we're quite off topic now. This is where porn has led us. That horrible, scandalous speech scene has led to porn, which led to age of consent and teachers banging students. And
well, I think all that's somewhat on topic.
True. It's amazing
UFC,
how
not so much.
UFC, not so much. Apologies for that, but sometimes Jay and I don't get to talk about it as much. So yeah.
Right.
Maybe I'll watch some of whatever tomorrow's thing is. But I'm trying to think of a way to jump back in now. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, it's a relatively short film. There's a lot going on, a lot to chew on in the meantime, but it is rather short runtime.
Yeah. Okay, I thought of something that's in there that's interesting. So it's one of those movies that, like, now I don't think there's any specific kind of, like, type of film Ingmar Bergman likes to do more than others. I think he's shown that he can be very versatile. But some of his most famous movies besides Persona are usually, like, are period pieces. Like, obviously, Virgin Spring and Seventh Seal are both set, like, the medieval period. Then you've got I know it's lesser known, but I've seen it. The Magician is set in, like, the 19th century. It's funny, Hour of the Wolf, I don't know if that was supposed to be contemporary or not, because Hour of the Wolf felt like it was more like early 20th century than like 1968. But it's hard to tell because the whole point is they're on like a remote island, like away from society. So it's just like, yeah, maybe the cabin they're staying in is like intentionally rustic and they don't have like, you know, obviously they're not going to have TV or a telephone and stuff like that. So I don't really know if that's said or not. But anyway, what's interesting about this movie is like most of it is done in such a way where it seems like it could have been sort of like any point in the 20th century up to that point. Like it could have been as early as the 30s maybe, except there's a couple moments that establish it firmly in the present to make it a contemporary movie. One is that early in the movie, Elizabeth is watching TV in the hospital and she starts seeing American coverage of the Vietnam War, right? Specifically that moment, again, we're going to see real footage. This is something from real life that happened. That part where in one of the cities when they're trying to impose order, remember that it was very famous, you know, the monk immolated himself. The monk in protest lit himself on fire. You see that in the movie and you see her reacting to it. So there's one other thing that references another war, World War II, where she comes across a very famous photo of Nazis rounding up Jews in the Warsaw Ghetto, and you have that very famous shot of the kid like surrendering to the Nazis. This little kid, like that's real. That's a real photo from that actually happened. I always wonder. Both of them are used to cause an emotional reaction from Elizabeth, but how necessary really are they for the movie? It almost felt like, at least in the case of the Vietnam one, it was just like he wanted people to know that this was like a current movie.
You may be right.
Vietnam was pretty much just getting started when this movie was being made. All the stuff over in Vietnam, like most things have been building for a while, but this whole idea of like an actual war breaking out and the U.S. getting more involved and stuff, like 1965 into 1966. And also, as far as the photo at the end goes, or towards the photos later on in the movie at the cottage, once again, she's like reacting to it emotionally. Like, I get the first one. I don't really get the second one. I think the first one is sort of to establish where we are, that it is contemporary. And it's also showing that even though she's isolated herself and put herself in this weird bubble, she can still be affected by the outside world, I guess is what they're showing. But the other one is weird because, yeah, I know that, like, World War II was still somewhat recent, Plenty of people were still around who had lived through it, of course. It was only 20 years after the war. But I never really understood what the point of having that photo and her seeing it means. So that's one that I'm confused about.
I was going to mention also the car that Alma drives is a 1962 Volvo.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I wouldn't have been able to tell that. But yeah, I mean, a fairly current car.
Right. So it's, just another thing establishing the time period.
Yeah. But, the picture of the Warsaw Ghetto, which is a photo, I recognize. I've seen it before a lot. It's been used all sorts of places. It's in almost every documentary you're going to see on the Holocaust. But, yeah, I thought it was interesting that just happened to be in the doctor's cottage by the sea. An interesting thing to keep.
Yeah.
And that Elizabeth would stumble across it. And at this point, because in the other part is at the hospital, she's only just been introduced to Alma. Like, nothing's happened between her and Alma yet. But with the photo, this is when she and Alma are well into it. Stuff has already happened. Things have gone weird and off the rails. And now to add to it, she looks at this photo. And I'm not really sure what it's supposed to mean or what it's supposed to really ignite within her. Again, she has her emotional reaction to it. I guess she finds it upsetting, as one would. But I don't really know what it adds or what purpose it serves. Well, I guess you don't either.
No, I don't.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's another part of the movie that I don't really have even a theory for. Because, I mean, a lot of it's just stuff that's open to interpretation and different things you can say about it. But I don't really know what point, because she's already had all sorts of emotional stimulus at this point. She's already had all sorts of things to feel and react to. This seems kind of like just adding another thing that's quite unrelated to the events of the movie. It was a tragedy and a terrible thing, but it happened 20 years ago and doesn't have anything specifically to do with what's going on here and there. They're in Sweden in 1966. Yeah, I don't know.
There was a time in my life when I thought Bergman's films were a bit pretentious.
Oh, sure. I think he's often sort of the poster boy for this, right?
But I've kind of changed my opinion on it, because I think what I think is pretentious is people trying to mimic his style. I think he's got a real unique style, which, I mean, it is what it is. And then you've got people trying to mimic that. Like, I think of David Lynch as a guy who probably takes a lot from Bergman. And I'm sure.
I mean, you watch something like, especially something like, what's it called? The one I hate.
Not Inland Empire?
No, from way back in the day.
Oh, the one with Nicolas Cage in it?
No, even earlier. Why can't I think of it? The Mindfuck one from the 70s.
Oh, you're talking about the one with the baby.
Yeah.
What is the name of that one?
Anyway, you can see elements from, of that is definitely.
Right.
I don't know why I can't think of its title. But anyway.
Dude,
I'm a David Lynch fan, but I hate that movie with every fiber of my being. Eraserhead. Like, I mean, I guess the movie is a success because it does what it sets out to do. It's very unsettling and uncomfortable. I just get nothing out of it. And I mean, I am a person who likes arty movies and stuff, and I like disturbing imagery and stuff. But that movie, fuck that movie. I watched it once. I'll never see it again. I just hated every single second of Eraserhead. But anyway, there's bits of Eraserhead I think that were definitely influenced by this movie. Even the whole idea of rejecting a baby.
But not to hurt anyone's feelings, but I think David Lynch can be kind of pretentious at times.
I think so. Yeah.
There's one of the episodes of the new Twin Peaks season that came out. There's a shot of a barkeep just sweeping up like peanuts in a bar, peanut shells for, a solid like 4 minutes, and it's just ridiculous. It's like, what are you doing here? And all the Lynch fans are like, "Oh, it's brilliant! Look how, he's showing this and that." It's like, no, he just lingered on the scene too long. I mean,
that's how dumb some of these Lynch fans are, not to start a whole thing. But I mean, David Lynch himself has admitted many times that a lot of stuff that he puts in that's weird is weird for the sake of weird. Mm-hmm. He'll often say, like, I'm not going for symbolism there. I just thought this was kind of weird and interesting and amusing, so I threw it in. It doesn't have a deeper significance. Like, he's literally said, like, not those exact words, but I mean, that is what he meant by it. He's often said, stuff he put in was fairly haphazard, and it wasn't like it was planned well in advance or it was supposed to necessarily connect to something else will connect you down the line. It was more like in the moment he thought it was kind of interesting or cool or weird, and so he threw it in. Like, he said as much. But yeah, I don't know. But yeah, I definitely agree with some of his stuff being pretentious. And what you said about Bergman, I think, is spot on, because I think one of the ultimate examples when people think of a pretentious film is The Seventh Seal.
Right.
That's only by people who haven't actually seen the movie. If you watch The Seventh Seal, for all its reputation and symbolism, it's a fairly straightforward movie. I get it. There's a knight playing chess with death. I know. But apart from that, and even that is straightforward, because the chess game is pretty, like, the stakes are what they are. It's about living and dying. There's no greater, weird, or hidden meaning behind that. And the story itself is fairly straightforward. So that's like, sometimes movies just get hijacked by their reputations. And that's definitely one of them. And I think you're right that it extends to Ingmar Bergman, where people think of him as overly pretentious.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you watch his movies, I don't think you'll find that. I mean, the persona movie we're discussing here probably is a little higher than it. It's a bit more pretentious than other movies, but that's because it's very psychological. It's very cerebral.
It's all intentional.
But you watch most of his movies, and they're really not. I mean, yeah. Especially Seventh Seal. That's what I always think of.
Yeah, that's like, if you look up, pretentious art house film, you'd probably be The Seventh Seal would be there.
Yeah, for people who haven't seen it, watch the movie and you'll understand that it's really not that people are just misunderstanding. People who hadn't seen it are just taking things they heard about it or still images and forming their own opinion on it. And I'm not saying I've never done that with a movie. Sure, I have, but yeah, just trying to set the record straight on Bergman. That no, he's not the pretentious guy that you think he is. And I know we talked about this before too. I don't think Kubrick was pretentious, but Kubrick was a massive fan of Bergman. He was like a total Bergman fan. Basically, his career was trying to be as good as Bergman. Like, those are pretty, like, he's admitted to as much. Like, that's what he's trying to do. He felt like Bergman set the bar, and he was just trying to keep up and make films that were half as good.
Well, they were almost contemporaries. I mean, right? I mean,
yeah, almost.
He was making films back in the 50s, right? Kubrick?
Yeah, he was. I mean,
so they would have
Paths of Glory is from the 50s.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Spartacus is from 1960. So, yeah.
So, yeah, they would have been,
So, yeah, I mean, he started a bit later. He is younger, and he started later. But, yeah, there was a time where they were making films at the same time.
I don't really see, I don't see a lot of that in Kubrick's work that I can think of right off.
Well, that's what I mean. I think that he was more just inspired to make good films. He wasn't inspired to just ape his style.
Yeah.
Which is something I respect. Like, he loved Bergman, and he loved what he did, but he knew he couldn't do that. He knew he had to go his own way and do his own films.
Well, I respect that.
But yeah, which I mean is really what you want filmmakers to do. But I understand, being influenced by somebody and wanting to do things the way they do. I feel that way all the time about my writing. I read various writings like, I wish I could come up with something like that, or write in that kind of style, or, I think that all the time. So I understand it, but wanting to imitate. But in the case of Kubrick, it's good. I mean, it'd be a waste of talent to just imitate somebody else when he has his own good style. But yeah, no, I mean, on the list of pretentious filmmakers, I don't know. I only feel like a guy like Christopher Nolan might be more pretentious.
Yeah, sure.
And I like Christopher Nolan, but I feel like Christopher Nolan is a victim of his own success. I kind of wish if he hadn't been as successful as he wouldn't have gone down this path of just like thinking everything he does is brilliant and has to be done like I think most even people. I haven't seen Tenet yet, so I'm not trying to do the thing of like forming an opinion of a movie without seeing it. But I just mean like even the actors involved in Tenet don't know what the hell is supposed to be going on in it. Doesn't that seem like a bad sign? That it's so convoluted and so confusing. Even your actors don't really get it.
I've heard people say it's just
we're talking about two different things. Yeah, because we're talking about two different things here. There's one thing to have a movie like this where getting it is more open to, there's no right or wrong answer. There's different ways to interpret it and stuff. But then there's something like Tenet, which is telling like a supposedly coherent story and things that really happen. And then yet, like, people are just like, I don't really know how that happened or why that happened or, that seems like the mark of bad storytelling to me. But I haven't seen the movie, so I don't know. Maybe I'll really like it. Because, I mean, it's not like I dislike Christopher Nolan. I always love him for the Batmans. He did such a great job with them. And I like other stuff he did, too. But I do feel like he's pretentious.
I'm mixed on Bergman. There's a lot of stuff he's done lately that I didn't like. Inception, really.
I feel like Inception's probably the most pretentious.
Didn't he do Interstellar? Was that him?
Yeah, and see, I feel like that was a movie that was undone by its own pretentiousness, because I felt like a lot of it was good, but this whole deeper metaphysical stuff that he tied to it, particularly how the ending works, I feel like sinks it. Because I think there is a pretty good movie in there. It's it's pretty well acted. Well, not everybody. Who's the female in that? I always forget her name. Always.
Jessica Chastain?
No, I like her, and I don't forget her name. But the one who had been in other Nolan movies because she was Catwoman.
Oh, Anne Hathaway.
Yeah, Anne Hathaway is god-awful in that movie. So I can't say. But anyway, the movie it has things that are well done and good and interesting, but I feel like that movie is undone by its own pretentiousness because he's doing this thing about space-time and emotions and
it's
clunky to me.
Which seems similar to what Tenet is trying to do, but I don't know.
See, I feel like Interstellar, speaking of Kubrick, is some sort of like modern reinterpretation of doing something like a 2001 Space Odyssey. It's trying to have the same sort of impact.
Well, he did not achieve that.
No. So I mean, Nolan is a guy I like, but yeah, if I had to name somebody who I think is pretentious, I think Nolan fits. I think he is pretentious.
Did you ever see Dunkirk?
Never got around to it.
Me either.
I'm sure it's good.
Just haven't been in the mood to watch war movies in a while.
Yeah, I hadn't been. It's funny because I just recently watched 2 in a row, the Vietnam movie, just because they happened to be on. Because the thing was, I don't think I'd ever seen Platoon all the way through in my life. I'd just seen parts of it here and there. So anyway, some channel I don't usually get is available now, and Platoon was on, so I watched it. And then the Vietnam movie I like more than that, Casualties of War with Michael J. Fox was on right after, which I'd seen before, and I watched that again. So I have just recently watched 2 war movies, but they were the first war movies I'd seen in a long time. Platoon is like the only movie speaking of famous directors, is like the only movie I actually like by Oliver Stone.
Oh, really?
Don't like Oliver Stone at all. Like, I don't hate all of his movies, I just don't like any of them. Platoon I like, although I don't think it's amazing. But,
1917, that's one I was trying to think of. I did see that one.
Dunkirk and 1917, they're not done by the same person, right? Somebody different did 1917.
Yeah.
Isn't Sam Mendes 1917? Yeah, I want to see 1917 because I'm always saying, there's not enough stuff about World War I because I like World War I. So, I mean, I will definitely watch it.
It didn't do it for me. It's not a bad film by any means. It's just covering stuff I don't really care about. But that's just me. It's a perfectly well done film. They shoot it to where it's supposed to look like one long shot with no cuts.
Wow.
Following these 2 guys for their journey, trying to get a message back to another person.
Yeah, I'll definitely watch it because I am interested in that stuff. I like World War I.
Yeah, trench.
I feel like it's a bit underplayed in pop culture. Really, it gets totally overshadowed by like World War II and Vietnam and stuff.
I think Vietnam. I mean, think how many movies are about Vietnam.
Yeah. And I mean,
Even-
my favorite war movie probably is Vietnam, because I mean, Apocalypse Now. Though Apocalypse Now and Thin Red Line are kind of neck and neck. They're kind of like in a tie for my favorite war movie.
Even though it doesn't
I'd
have
love for us
war
to
in
do
it.
I know it's a long one and it would take some preparation, but I'd love for us to do Thin Red Line. We still haven't done any Terrence Malick, and we talk about doing them all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I'll do it. I'll definitely do it. I'm not a big fan of that film, but I need to watch it again.
See, it's funny. It brings us back around to pretentious. I'm sure a lot of people think that movie is really pretentious. And I realize that pretentious sometimes is just a subjective thing, because I don't find it pretentious, but I totally understand why people do. So, you know, it's one of those things. Because it's a very philosophical movie, right? It's full of, like, soldiers having, like, soliloquies in their head about, like, the meaning of life and shit like that. So I get it, but I think it's well written, so it works. If it wasn't well written, it would be, you know, painful and terrible, but I really enjoy it. Plus, it's just one of the most. It's probably the most beautiful visual lore movies you're ever going to see.
That's Malick for you.
That's Malick.
Even his movies that aren't any good are still beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think we've done any of his movies, so it'd be good to do something.
Yeah. I think my favorite war film would probably be Saving Private Ryan.
It was very good.
And oh gosh, what's the other one that we covered on here?
About a war movie?
About war, Spielberg.
Empire of the Sun.
Empire of the Sun. Yeah, that's a good one too.
Yeah, love that. It's one of my favorite war movies. Because, yeah, you have to break out. There's war movies, and then there's war movies that specifically are about soldiers, and then there's war movies that are about, like, other people, which is what Empire of the Sun is about. Like,
right. You don't really see a lot of war footage.
Right. Yeah. The focus is on war's effect on, like, more like everyday people than the soldiers. And, you know, that's good. You need both. You need both kinds of movies.
How do you feel about Born on the 4th of July, since you love Oliver Stone?
Don't like it. I like, you know, I like what it's about. I kind of like the point the movie's making. I just don't particularly like the movie. Yeah, so Oliver Stone did 2 movies about Vietnam. Huh.
Hell, it may have been more than that.
I think what I always forget about Casualties of War is that it's Brian De Palma, because it's so different from Brian De Palma stuff, because it's not his usual thing. It's not like being like weird set pieces and interesting Hitchcockian style. No, it's just here's a war movie about a true event.
You're right. Maybe it was just like, I got to do a war movie about Vietnam, since all the other big guys are doing
Everybody did it all through the 80s. Yeah.
And, you know, that's funny. It doesn't feel like a De Palma film.
No. Because, it's removed from all his usual stuff. Which is fine, because it shows that he can be a good director even without his bells and whistles. Not that I, think that his bells and whistles are bad or cheap or anything like that. I'm just saying, it just shows he can competently direct a movie without necessarily putting all his fingerprints all over it.
You gotta love Any Given Sunday, though, right?
I despise that movie. Like, I don't just that's one I really hate. Like,
that's a good one.
Most of Stone's movies, I don't dislike. I just don't care about them. I hate Any Given Sunday. I want the time back from my life. I hate it that much. God, I hate it. Especially Cameron Diaz. I wanted to outright murder her. She's so despicable in that movie.
I think I don't think it's a good movie, but I do like it.
That movie twisted me against her for years, which is really unfair, because she's an okay actress and probably an okay human being. But all I could see was that. It took me years to come back around to her. I think I finally started to like her again when I saw Bad Teacher, which I thought was okay.
Mm-hmm. I'll tell you, one of Stone's films that I actually do like a lot is Talk Radio.
I haven't seen it, so maybe I can see it and we'll redeem him in my eyes, because I haven't seen that.
Yeah, it's a little different than some of his other stuff, so you might like that one.
I feel like his movies are just so bloated.
Yeah.
Like, even Natural Born Killers is. And I feel like when we talk about symbolism, when we talk about satire and stuff like that, I feel like there's a right way to do it and a wrong way, and I feel like Natural Born Killers is the wrong way. I feel like Natural Born Killers, people are like, that's the point. I'm like, it's not. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like it really does glorify violence. I really do. I don't feel like it's, making a point about the way society. I feel like it's just. I feel like that was what they tried to do, but all they just wound up doing was making another thing that glorifies violence. I know it's like this is what society does, but I was just like, I don't know. And I'm just not interested in it. It's a really weird role for Woody Harrelson. That freaks me out. Like, I'm used to Woody Harrelson and seeing him in a lot of movies, but never like that.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm mixed on that one. I've never really liked it. There are parts of it that I like, but I don't know.
Well, that's another one where it's more like, well, I don't like the movie. It seems like I hate it, but that's more because I know what a glowing reputation it has, and there's a lot of people that are huge fans of it, and it annoys me. And I know I shouldn't care, but sometimes that works, right? Like, sometimes I'm just super annoyed that a movie is so popular and loved, and that's one of them. I'm really annoyed by how many people love that movie. I know from Cameron really likes that movie.
I had a friend that he started a podcast called the Wayne Gale Variety Hour. From
Is that Robert Downey Jr.?
Yeah.
He's pretty good. Robert Downey Jr. is pretty good in that.
Wayne Gale. Like, yeah, he is. He is good.
He is good, but
I think all the actors are fine in the film. It's just it puts me in a bad headspace, man.
It's just such an assault on your senses.
I just don't.
Which I get. Again, they say that's the point. I know, but it doesn't make me like it anymore.
And you talk about pretentious filmmaking, like he pretty much checks off all the boxes in that one.
Yeah, and some of it works for me. Like I like the flashback about her family.
Yeah.
What's his name? Rodney Dangerfield. Yeah. And it's all really dark and uncomfortable, but there's a laugh track. Like I kind of like. Some of it works for me, but yeah.
Yeah, a lot of it. I mean, and then when she gets bit by the snake, everything goes black and white.
Forgot about that.
Yeah, and that's when they eventually get caught. Is it just a grocery store with a pharmacy in it? I think.
I don't remember. Maybe
that he's trying to get medicine for the snake bite, and eventually kills a bunch of people, and then has to stand off with the police.
Juliette something.
Yeah,
I don't like her.
She does a great job of playing crazy, though.
Yeah, I guess she does. She's just not in movies I care about. So again, it's less like I dislike her. It's more she just shows up in movies I don't like.
I can't really think of right off a lot of movies that she's done.
Not a lot.
Christmas Vacation.
Well, obviously I'm fine with that.
I think she's really focused more on her musical career.
Yeah, I know that she has one, but I don't know anything about it. Like, I've never heard her sing a song in my life. I'm sure she can sing, but...
Yeah, she does a great job with that.
She's all over the place in the 90s. She's in California, which is a boring movie. She's in Strange Days, which is a good movie, but it didn't matter that it was her. It could be literally anyone. She's
Cape Fear.
She's the sullen-faced girl in From Dusk Till Dawn, which I find really distracting. I wish it was someone else. That's one where I do wish it was someone else.
I think she's fine in that.
She just scowls through that whole movie, and she has a painful accent. Like, I hate it.
Cape Fear.
Oh, she's the daughter in Cape Fear? Yeah, she'd be pretty young there.
Of legal age, but still young.
She was 18 in that movie?
I would think so, yeah. She's probably pushing 60, man.
Let's see.
She was born in 73.
Yeah, so not pushing
73.
She's 47. She's 47, so that's not pushing 60. It's pushing 50.
I know. 18. Exactly 18.
So yeah, she would have been 18 in 91. You're right.
Barely legal.
She looked younger. Which I guess it makes sense for the role, because usually when they'll have teenagers, they're always being played by people in their 20s, and it's fairly obvious that they're in their 20s.
Sorry, my mother sent me a barrage of text messages. I'm trying to see if everything's okay.
I heard that.
Yeah, she's cool.
Okay, that's good.
she has an iPhone and I don't. So when she writes her long message, it comes in as a bunch of different. So that's always fun.
Huh. I'm just looking at some other stuff about psychology here.
We could definitely get into that, but I think it would just bore people.
Well, I did. Yeah, I know. Well, it's just one thing I was thinking about, and they do allude to it on the Wikipedia page, is there is something called the Electra complex, which is something from not Jung though. It's like Neo-Freudian thing, and it's interesting because the play she was acting in when she went mute was Electra.
Mm-hmm.
Well, people know that, but Electra is one of the Greek tragedies. I think it's Sophocles, and it relates. It's funny because I was the last few weeks. I think I even told you I was all over the Trojan War and stuff like that. Well,
Yeah.
Electra is one of the daughters of Agamemnon and Clytemnestra, and the more famous play probably is the one called Agamemnon, which is about how when Agamemnon came back from the Trojan War after 10 years or whatever like that, his wife Clytemnestra had a new lover and killed him. And then there's different interpretations if she just killed him because she had a new lover, or if she killed him as revenge because to get the Greek fleet to get the winds they needed to sail to Troy, he sacrificed his daughter Iphigenia. So in some interpretations, Clytemnestra killed him for that. Anyway, Electra was the other daughter. So there's a play by Sophocles about that seems to take place around the same time as when Agamemnon would have. And there's a whole thing called the Electra complex, but that I don't know how well it works because it's almost kind of like the female version of the Oedipus thing. It's the idea of like a girl having some sort of like being sort of in a competition with the mother for affection and attention from the father.
Right.
Right. I mean, that doesn't really relate too much to this movie, I would say. In fact, it's interesting if you think about it. If you think about the age of the actress, now they never say. They just say she was an Electra. Now she is, a big name, so it would make sense for her to play the lead. But also, if you think about it, she's a little old for the lead, so there's a good chance she played Clytemnestra in it, which would be a whole other thing. But anyway, because of course Clytemnestra, in some versions she kills Agamemnon herself, in other ones, she's just part privy to it. But in any case, because she has a breakdown of her marriage, but it's revealed she wants to kill her kid, not her husband. In fact, her husband's seems to be a complete non-factor through the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And then things get really trippy at the end there, where her husband seems to mistakenly think that Alma is her and they talk to each other while she's just there. And it's a weird fake out too, because when it first happens, the way the camera is sort of like a trick. Is you have him come, Alma rushes outside and he's there, and he has this big long speech, which is obviously meant for Elizabeth, not Alma. And you're like, why is he talking to Alma like it's his wife? But then the camera pans to reveal even further that, oh no, Elizabeth is there. She's behind Alma. This makes perfect sense. He's ignoring Alma and talking to Elizabeth. Alma's just confused. But then, no, they double down on it, and she approaches him directly, and they speak directly, while Elizabeth just sort of stares on with horror. And then it's implied later, even that they sleep together with Elizabeth watching. And then, then she has another breakdown talking about how perverse and awful it all is. And it's another part of the movie where it's like, this couldn't really be happening, right? This is in somebody's head. Like, there's no way. I don't care how fucked up the two of them are. The guy's outside of it. He's not going to not know who his own wife is. So, yeah. But it's another thing that's never really explained or anything in the movie. Just another way for them to mess with us.
Right. Just another intentional way of throwing you off of whatever you think is going on. It couldn't have happened, right? It was just another dream sequence or something.
I'd have to think so, because the husband exists outside of this. For him to just suddenly lose his wits completely so that he thinks a completely different woman is his wife is a little much, even in the context of this movie.
Yeah, I agree. Trying to say, I've read Electra before, but that was way back in high school.
That's not actually one I've read. I might own it because I own some collections of the Greek tragedy people. I was for Sophocles, Euripides, and then the other one I can't pronounce. Aeschylus or something. And he's the one whose most of his plays didn't survive.
Aeschylus?
Yeah, I'm not sure how to say it. Aeschylus.
Aeschylus, I think that's how we used to say it.
Okay, that could be
it's the A and the E together that throw you off.
Yeah. Sophocles is the one I know best and studied. I mean, Sophocles is probably the most famous of the three. I mean, he's the one that did Oedipus Rex and Antigone and stuff like that. But it's funny that I can't remember what other ones, but there's at least a couple other movies we've done that had like weird allusions to Greek tragedy.
Yeah.
Which I guess makes sense.
Deals with key themes that can apply.
Those Greek plays are some of the earliest known. It's some of the earliest literature, so it's always kind of cool or classy to call back to them since they introduced so many storytelling conventions.
So Sophocles and Euripides both wrote a version of Electra, and then Aeschylus did the play.
Oh, so confusing.
I know. I don't know which one I read, what version, but I took ancient Greek history and a couple of years of Greek, and actually 3 years of Greek in school. High school.
You did more than I did. No, I just touched on some of the Greek tragedy stuff way back in my first year of university. We did this whole thing of Western canon, and we started in the ancient world. So for a couple of them, before we moved on, like I said, we did the Odyssey and some of the Greek tragedies, and then very quickly moved on.
We did that just in literature class.
Yeah.
Pretty early on too. I think maybe 7th and 8th grade. Good stuff, though.
I do think the term like the Dark Ages is a misnomer, and most people just don't understand it. But it is true that if you're thinking of like great, like classic Western literature, there is a massive jump over that period because you have like stuff from the ancient world. Like the earliest known thing I think is the Epic of Gilgamesh. That's like the oldest story anybody knows. And then you've got stuff like the Odyssey and the other one,
the
Iliad, which weren't written down way back then. They were oral. They were orally things, and then you finally get into ancient writings like ancient Greek stuff, like those playwrights and stuff. And then like around that time, you've got biblical stuff that was included in the Bible or even the Bible itself. Then you have some of the ancient Rome stuff, like stuff by like Virgil did the Aeneid, which is kind of like an unofficial sequel to the Iliad and the Odyssey. Ovid did Metamorphosis. So that's Rome, because that's a few centuries later. But then you have like usually there's a big jump from like Rome into like the Middle Ages. Like if you're going like 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th century, like there's nothing. So I get why some people think of it as the Dark Ages from that, but that doesn't mean it was just like all nothing. But there is a big jump there in literature, and then it really gets going again for the Renaissance with all that stuff.
Yeah. Makes you wonder how much creative license these people that transcribe this stuff used. With the Bible too, back before the printing press and all that, it was just.
I mean, the Bible's been changed and revised so many times, and it's funny, like how many books that were part of the Bible exist today, and people don't even seem to know. It's like, that at one point that wasn't the Bible. There's all sorts of different versions and myths of stories that we know from the Bible. Like there's ones that like add more chapters. Like we're like that was the end of that story. It's like, well, in some texts, this went on and more stuff happened and talked about, but for whatever reason, it didn't get included in the Bible for, I'm sure, all sorts of different reasons and political reasons and stuff.
Seems like every once in a while they either take out or add some books.
Yeah.
This is canon now.
That's why it's very difficult to have any sort of conversation with people that like are biblical literalists. It's difficult already, but like even just to get them to admit that it's been changed and edited over the centuries, they seem to act like no, some perfect book was written around 2,000 years ago and it's been the same all the whole time. No fucking way.
Yeah. Who I trust, though, is King James. He knew how to give us the best version.
He's the definitive guy. He's the definitive as far as the way the English translation is. But that's the other thing. Like, this existed in many languages before it got to English, people.
Some mad king just wrote his own Bible.
That's
a good one.
they were mad when they first translated it to English because the whole point was like the Bible wasn't even supposed to be meant for common people. It was only supposed to be meant for like members of the church and upper class people who could actually read it in Greek or Roman or whatever it was, not Roman, Latin at the time. You know, the idea of in the Anglophone world, the idea of taking the Latin text of the Bible and making it English was almost sacrilegious. It's like, no, not for the commoners. And it's like,
but it's more like
still like most of the commoners couldn't even read English. So what are you talking about?
Couldn't even read.
There was a real backlash. Yeah, exactly. They couldn't read anything.
So it was more like the higher ups and like the popes and bishops and stuff, cardinals. They wanted to be able to read it, and then dictate what it says to the people, right? So they can't actually read it themselves. You're going to get my, sermon or whatever on it.
Right. Yeah, and particularly the Catholic control of it is one of the reasons why it's been found out that like women's roles in the Bible have been either greatly reduced or gotten rid of entirely. And that had a lot to do with the Catholic Church because it was a male-centric system, right? Mm-hmm. Women had pretty much no position in it. So that's another thing. Like I said, there's texts out there that were at one point considered part of the Bible that have that's focused more on female characters. It's not like these were completely lost to history. No, they're around, or at least partially. But I don't know. Some people are just very narrow-minded.
Yeah.
You have the people that they believe what they see on TV or read in the newspapers or read in the Bible, but they don't want to hear anything outside of that. But I mean, as far as this movie goes, yeah, it really sidesteps the usual religious stuff that he has in his movies. Although early on, when they have that montage of images, there is a shot of a nail going through a palm, which of course is an image of the crucifixion. Although I think, that's been another thing from the Bible that's been exaggerated. Yeah, crucifixion is absolutely part of history and happened, but you couldn't nail people up by the palms. It didn't work. You had to nail them at the wrist.
Go to the wrist, yeah. That's what I was going to say.
But that's
always classic through the palm, right?
Yeah, all the pictures are in the palm. And it's even mentioned in the Bible because there's a whole point where I remember the story about doubting Thomas. Thomas was one of the disciples that he didn't believe it was really Jesus, but he's like, look at my palm. See the scars? Yeah.
So that's where the term doubting Thomas comes from, huh?
Yeah, because
I didn't know that.
Thomas didn't believe it was really him, but he showed him the scars in his palm, and it was very clear that it was his palm. So artistic license, because it's like we tried nailing bodies up, and they wouldn't hold up for the palm. You got to go through the wrist. But anyway, there is a shot of that in the montage of images early in this movie, so. Something religious, but I think that's just more of a distraction. Yeah, because this movie really doesn't focus too much on religion the way a lot of his movies do. As I said, the closest I could come up with was sort of like the parallel of his whole Silence of God thing and internalizing it and turning it into like a silence of the individual. But I mean, religion is such a broad thing that you can tie any movie into it. It's not too hard. But I think in this case, it's. I'm sure you can find something, but it's less prominent than other topics that we've talked about. Oh yeah, it says here that Electra is a play by either Sophocles or Euripides, so it's like they couldn't even decide which one actually wrote it. I mean, it's from so long ago, it makes sense.
Right.
Oh yeah, I forgot. I'm looking at the Wikipedia article again. There's a thing about vampirism. Remember, there's a moment of actual vampirism.
Yes,
it's most likely understood to be imagined because I think it even changes their location for it. Because suddenly it seems like they're back in the hospital and she's in her nurse's uniform when she offers her wrist to feed on. So yeah, just another sort of fake out type thing, just sort of symbolizing what she thinks like that now she's achieved some sort of dominance over her. So it's like, I used to love you and revere you, and I don't need you anymore, and I've cast you off. And
right.
That's her personal revelation. Whether or not Elizabeth sees it that way we don't know.
Yeah, themes of vampirism.
Yeah, and I mean, in a less literal sense of vampirism, it's kind of, like the other way around at first. Almost kind of a vampire feeding off her because of her experiences and all those things. She's lesser and she sees her as greater, and she wants to be able to absorb some of her greatness. And
Right.
sees her as such a great role model, like as the ideal type of woman, a good artist who hasn't sacrificed any of her femininity or anything, and going to be a mother and a wife, but also a professional. All this type of stuff she supposedly aspires to.
Yeah, I was going to say it's probably like a more of the them becoming one. One absorbing the other.
Right. Bergman did say something when asked about the vampirism. Psychologist Daniel Shaw interpreted as Elizabeth as the vampire and Alma as the sacrificial lamb. So he saw it that way. Bergman replied when asked if Alma was entirely consumed. This is a Bergman quote now. "No, she has just provided some blood and meat and some good steak. Then she can go on. You must know, Elizabeth is intelligent, she's sensible, and she has emotions. She is immoral. She's a gifted woman, but she's a monster because she has an emptiness in her." Which is interesting, because I think most people who watch the movie are more sympathetic towards Elizabeth and think of like Alma as more the monster. Although I guess if what Alma's saying is true about her really resenting her son and wishing he died, but usually when that happens, that's not necessarily a moral failing. That's some sort of psychological break that sometimes happens to women when they give birth. It's not necessarily a character flaw, like she's somebody that was always going to hate children or hate her own child.
Right.
But Bergman himself has referred to Elizabeth as a monster, so that's interesting.
Yeah, I could see that in that she's an actress possibly doing research for a role.
Right. I mean,
maybe this is all an act.
Clearly emotionally manipulative.
Right.
I think blows up in her face.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think it's pretty clear to me that she did want her to read the letter and she wanted to see her reaction, but she was pretty surprised by the reaction she got. Is how it seems to me. And she calls her out on it. She doesn't call her a monster, but she calls her something like that. But yeah, I'm reading the stuff that's what actually shows up in those montages in the prologue. So you got the projector clip, the projector running and sort of slowing down and stuff. There's some old timey classic animation from the silent film era. There's the crucifixion part. There's the penis.
It's like he's just hitting on a bunch of elements that are make people think like it's.
In a way, it's supposed to sort of like sum up cinema itself by taking various elements that show up over and over again in cinema. It's just like hitting on the tropes.
That makes sense. What he's doing.
Yeah. We cover most of it. I mean, there's other stuff to get into. Like I said, there's always deeper psychology. And then there's stuff about performances and artists and stuff. There's something here that I didn't pick up on about their acting styles. She delivers monologues and all. Oh, okay. So, yeah, that is true. Because, so, like, this is something I just read. So, like, most movies or even plays, what you usually have happen is you have multiple characters, and what you have is dialogue. You got the characters talking to each other. But since there's not actually a dialogue going on in this movie, instead what you have is one character who delivers monologues, and the other character who they refer to as a naturalistic mime, which I think is a little bit much, because mimes are usually more exaggerated. They do a lot more movement than what Elizabeth does. Although you can just say, well, Elizabeth a mime who just relies on her facial expressions. Fair enough. But yeah, that's just, once again, just nailing down some of the tropes from performances. But yeah, I hadn't thought of that. That's just something I just read now on Wikipedia. Elizabeth speaks only 14 words.
Is it that many? Okay, I was thinking it was less than that.
More, because she coaxes her and gets her to say the word nothing at the end before she leaves. She makes her say nothing, and then that bit where again it seems like a fake out, but doesn't she just say like no, don't?
Yeah.
And that's all I remember.
Me too.
So I don't know where they're getting more words from. I just watched the movie. I can't think of where the other words come from. 14 words. That's like more words than the Terminator says in the first Terminator.
Your clothes. Uzi 9mm.
Fuck you, asshole. Definitely the best one. I like that one, especially because you see that he has multiple choice. He has multiple things he can say, and that's one of the options, and he chooses that. That's an interesting example of dialogue. A cyborg that has like multiple choices for a response. Like,
Wasn't it like on the level that he's going for? Like this is like the most confrontational or whatever.
I can't remember, but yeah.
Okay.
I mean, they were all insults. I think.
She says nothing
Like,
twice. Nothing.
So
that's 2. I'm gonna count here.
Well, I'm only at like 4 because she says like no, don't, and I just don't remember anything else. Because even in like dream sequences, she's not talking, or what was considered to be definitely dream sequences. It's not like we see her talking at the beginning or anything.
I don't think that's right.
It doesn't seem right. There's no way it's more than 10 words.
I don't think it's more than, like you said, 4. Even if, she said nothing 2 times. I'm at 4.
All right, just because I happened upon it, this is not this movie, but earlier when I was talking about I was making comparisons to the, I said 1925, it's 1928. The 1928 silent film, The Passion of Joan d'Arc. I knew the director's name was Dreyer. His name is Carl Theodor Dreyer. And yeah, he made movies in the silent era, but he also made Vampire in 1932, and then he made a couple movies in the 1940s, a movie in the 1950s, and a movie in the 1960s. And I always wanted to see his last movie. He made a movie in 1964 called Gertrude, which was based on a play or something. I don't know. I always heard it was supposed to be kind of an interesting movie. But he's an interesting guy. But yeah, especially considering the first half of his career was silent movies, and then the last was not. But I've seen Passion of Joan d'Arc and I've seen Vampire, which are close together, and they're both really good movies, especially considering how old they are, because it's harder to appreciate these movies when you have so much time passing. But yeah, Dreyer, I don't remember. He's Dutch? Danish. He was Danish. But every once in a while on TCM, The Passion of Joan d'Arc comes on, and that's how I've seen it a couple times. And it might be except for Metropolis, it might be the best looking of the silent films. Well, and then again, I don't know. I guess it depends upon how you like style. Because, I mean, I really like something like The Captain of Dr. Cagliari, or Cagliari, because of all the cool effects. But, yeah, I guess it depends.
I've still never seen Metamorphosis. No, I mean Metropolis.
Metropolis is really good, and there's different versions you can see. You can see it with an 80s soundtrack, for instance. That exists.
That's weird.
Not like 80s like pop songs.
Yeah.
But like 80s like orchestra. Yeah, I don't know.
It's like they released Nosferatu with a typo negative. Do you remember that?
Yeah. I mean, as I've explained to many people, like even for me, it's difficult to always focus on a silent film. It's just hard. You're waiting for stuff to happen. So it's hard to recommend. You just have to put yourself in a different headspace. But I mean, if you're prepared to watch a silent film, Metropolis is definitely one you should watch. It is really good. And it's kind of astounding how much stuff is in it, considering how old it is. And it is one of the most influential films of all time. And we talk about influential films all the time, but I mean, we're going back to the 1920s and the silent era, so this is pretty early. So yeah, super influential and ahead of its time in a lot of ways. So if I was recommending a silent film, it's right at the top of the list. Although again, it is a bit long, and it can be a bit of a chore in places because it is a silent film, and we're just conditioned to not really watch movies that way.
Yeah. When did Talkies come about?
1929 was the last year, so I think it was 28 or 29 was when they came in. The jazz singer, was it?
Oh, is that right?
Was that the first one? Al Jolson, the jazz singer?
So after that, everything was pretty much had audio in it.
Yeah, by the 30s, it had become a standard thing. There were a couple people that hung on and did a couple because that's what they wanted. Even Chaplin did for a while because that was his thing, right? So some of Chaplin's movies, well into the 30s, are still silent because that's what he did. Like, I think City Lights might be 35 or something.
It didn't have music? Was there no music in it at all?
Oh, yeah, they had. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, they all had
Okay.
music. Silent films all have music.
Because I was going to say all the Chaplin I've seen is had music.
Oh, yeah. Well, at least any feature-length thing had music. As you know, when they did some of those short things, there wasn't necessarily a soundtrack that came with it. What they would do is they would have like somebody like live in the theater, like play piano or something along to it. I'm sure you've seen footage of that or that done in like a cartoon or a movie or something like that. That was the thing that happened. That wasn't like full length movies. Yeah, they would have musical soundtracks, just added later.
Mm-hmm.
They're definitely none of them are completely silent now. It's just such a weird concept. The idea of filming a story, but the actors can't be heard.
Mm-hmm.
To the point that like the kind of acting they're doing is just so different. Because you watch a scene and you'll see like 2 or 3 people interacting, and you're just like, you kind of know what they're supposed to be doing because it's been set up like what's going on. It's like, I don't know, the piano movers come up to say he's going to move the piano, and the people in the apartment are like, come on. And yet they seem to be taking way too long to just be saying anything or doing something. And then they might give you a line of dialogue, and you're like, well, but what was all the other stuff they were saying? And you're just like, how could audiences accept this? It's just so weird to think like.
It's almost like more akin to theater, right? Because it's all, really expressive actions.
Right, and that's why there was a pushback against it by a lot of actors and filmmakers at the time. Because you think, well, why could there be a pushback about adding sound to film? That's just natural. Life has sound and things like that. But they just gotten used to it, that it becomes sort of an art form in itself, right? That kind of acting.
It really has. It's just different. How you have to project and,
Right. Especially if you were from the school of like, if you had actually done theater. If you'd done theater and now you were in a sound movie, it was way different, like you said, about your project. Because when you're doing theater, you have to really emote and be loud so the people in the back can hear you. But in a film, you don't have to do that. There's cameras and microphones. And if you're just going really loud, it's going to come across as really loud and unnatural and stupid.
Well, that's what sets a lot of British actors apart, because they all study theater before they study acting. So,
yeah,
they all have been through that whole school. That's why they're stealing all our jobs.
I know,
because they're so much better at it.
I know. I mean, there are so many like movie stars that are at least passable actors, but if they had to like do like carry a play, they couldn't do it. Like they can't memorize that much dialogue for one thing.
It's not an easy thing to do. I wouldn't imagine.
Oh, it's not at all. And I'm somebody who's good at memorization. I'm still amazed by how well people memorize lines and the blocking too, because that's something it kind of even relates to like when I was learning martial arts. Like I can learn a kick and a punch and stuff like that, but when you're doing Taekwondo and you're doing forms, part of the belt test, is you have to, do a series of movements. You've seen them, kick here, and I have no memory for movement whatsoever. And this comes into play when I was taking theater. Was blocking scenes out. Like I'd be so concentrating hard on remembering my lines that I had no memory of where I was supposed to step or when, and I get confused when other actors were hitting their marks. I'd be like, oh shit, I'm supposed to be hitting my mark. That was like 3 lines ago. Like that's hard to keep in your head if you're not used to doing it. I'm sure you learn it over time, but that's a whole thing too. And it's one of those things that we take for granted because it's natural. But when you see it done wrong, you understand. I remember watching The Simpsons, and they always make fun of what a terrible performer Krusty really is. There's the part where Krusty's supposed to be in a play, and I think he's playing like FDR or something like that, and he like stands up during one of his lines. It's like, oh, that's right, I'm crippled. and sits back down. I mean, that's an extreme example. Most people are going to remember they're in a wheelchair, they can't walk around. But actually, you have Prime. There's a really funny. Speaking of British actors, have you seen the Goes Wrong show? Okay, you should watch the Goes Wrong show. It's about a theater company, and they just fuck everything up in the worst ways, and it's on purpose, and it's the audience gets it, but the illusion is like, yeah, they not only do they deliver their lines wrong, but they get their blocking all wrong. The set's always falling apart and stuff like that. There's like 6 episodes. There's a haunted house one. There's a Christmas one. There's a like American South one, a World War II one, and a court drama one. The courtroom drama one is really good because it really makes use of the blocking, because the whole point is to tell for this court case. There's a flashback that gets told like 3 different times. Mm-hmm. So for each time, the blocking is supposed to be the same because it's a flashback of the same scene. But the way the sets are organized, but yeah, that's on Prime. But it's really funny. Each one's maybe a half hour long. They're really funny. But that's the court one was my favorite one because of what they do with the blocking. It has to do with the way the sets are. It's really extreme in the southern one, because in the southern one, there's a whole part where a section of the room was constructed like with the wrong dimensions, so everybody's like upside down.
That's funny.
But you'd enjoy it.
Yeah, I'll definitely check that out. I'll watch that in just a little bit.
Yeah, but it's one of the things that makes clear like all the things we take for granted when we watch actors act, because they're like fucking them all up, and you're like, oh yeah, that's right. Like you have to remember this, you have to do this, that kind of thing. And some of it's just like also like knowing how long it takes other people to say their lines before you say theirs, and things like that. Like things you just take for granted. Right. But yeah, stage acting stuff, man.
Yeah. Well, you take for granted all that has to go into it. And it's funny enough that there's a bonus with Neil Patrick Harris. Apparently he's a super fan of that show. He's actually a guy I thought of who actually is a really good performer on stage.
Right. Yeah. I knew
and
that.
A good actor as well.
But yeah, all those classically trained British actors. It's one thing I was thinking about like a couple weeks ago, since it was the 5th of November. Actually, I couldn't watch it on the 5th. I watched it on the 6th. I watched V for Vendetta again. And it's so cool that like Hugo Weaving, who is the main character in that, like he's delivering all his lines when he doesn't have to. He's masked the whole time. They could just dub all that in. And especially hard at the beginning, because you might remember when he first introduces himself to Vivi, he gives that crazy long rapid fire speech with all the V words. Like that must have been so hard to like memorize and perform right. And again, there was no reason to do it, but he wanted to like be natural and stuff, and people react. So that's all him saying stuff, like stuff's not overdubbed later. So, but yeah, it's Hugo Weaving, just another one of those guys from that school that they really get in there.
You're right, though, classically trained, so he's no stranger to learning large lines of dialogue.
Exactly. But no matter what your background is, that scene is impressive because it's so rapid fire, and there's so many crazy V words. It'd be so easy to stumble and trip.
I've got to watch that again. I'm not saying
he did it right on the first take, maybe not, but I mean, he probably didn't take him too many pro like that.
I bought that on Blu-ray. I mean, probably 8 years ago. I've been meaning to watch it. I've read the graphic novel twice, and I haven't watched the movie again. So,
I think there's a really good adaptation.
Yeah, and I like the Wachowski siblings.
Oh yeah, they did the screenplay for that. I always forget that. We talked about that so long ago.
It was on the. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say, yeah, when we did Cloud Atlas, we were talking about that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's. I think. What's her name? The actress in that. In V for Vendetta.
Oh,
Natalie
Portman.
She's the one who gave the book to one of the.
Yeah, that's what it was too. Yeah, she was on the. It was on the set of the V for Vendetta. She was reading Cloud Atlas. Mm-hmm. And they were like, "What are you looking at? Like you're so engrossed in between every take. You're reading this." Yeah, that's how that got started.
That's a pretty cool fact. Knowing that if that sequence of events hadn't have happened, they wouldn't have made that movie.
Mm-hmm.
Which was a pretty cool movie. I liked it.
Yeah, I really like it. I mean, such a difficult undertaking.
That's going to go down as an underrated movie. Like that's going to go down as a classic. Like
that's how I felt, and that's why I really wanted us to do it. And I wanted you to see it because I felt like, this is a movie that didn't do too well in its time, and it's so easy to like dismiss the Wachowskis lately. But I was like, it's a really great achievement in a lot of ways. It's more complicated than the book because the way the book does the stories is it will do a half, then it does another half, and then it'll jump. This isn't doing it in halves. This is doing it in much smaller bits, jumping around, and they're trying to figure out the best way to make them sag together. And they did some really great sag. Anyway, see our episode on that. We talk about that in detail because that's as much as I love the story, like the main thing I think is good about the film is just the way it's edited together, and it took them a really long time to figure out how to do it, and that really was the Wachowskis. Somebody else was working with it too, but I mean, they were very much involved in it.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and Persona is yet another movie on the 1001 Movies to See Before You Die by Steven Schneider.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
We've covered I'm not surprised either. We covered quite a few of the films in that book.
So we're just about finished with this. I think there's no need to drag this out to 3 hours, but just going to talk about the ending, sort of what you feel like is going to happen from the ending. It's like, because it basically shows, again, we don't know how much we can trust, right? But I mean, what we see is almost sort of like leaving in triumph. It's like, oh, she's overcome her ordeal with Elizabeth, and now she's stronger. And now Elizabeth is sort of like has been rendered like powerless and weak. I kind of feel like that didn't really happen. That's just more like the way Alma imagined it.
Mm-hmm.
Because even in that question they said about the vampirism, they make it seem very much like Alma was the victim and she was overcome by Elizabeth and she wasn't strong enough to fight back. But the ending makes it seem like, oh no, she's evolved and now she's more powerful and she doesn't need you anymore and she's tossing you aside and she's going to go on with her great life and et cetera, et cetera. I think that's more of like a wishful thinking part of her, because I don't think of Alma as that psychologically strong.
As females usually weren't in film around that time.
Right, but at least in this case, it's like it's showing that one is clearly stronger than the other, I think, is what they're doing.
That Elizabeth is stronger than Alma.
Yeah, but if you take literally what you see on the screen, it doesn't play out that way. It makes it seem like Alma overcomes her, and she's like, I admired you and looked up to you and loved you and stuff, but now I see how terrible. She says like how rotten you are, and I'm gonna move on. And she says something really weird too. She says something like I'm not like you. I change all the time, which is a really weird thing to say to an actress.
That is interesting.
But she seems to be suggesting that like Elizabeth is stuck and can't evolve or anything.
Maybe that's a play on her acting career. Maybe she's stuck.
Yeah. It seems like a dig too. It's like, and you weren't even that good of an actress.
Right. But you're right though. How much can you actually trust? Because I don't know. Maybe both women. Assuming it did actually happen, they were actually physically there together. Maybe they both came away stronger from the experience.
Yeah, maybe. The feeling I more get though is that they both like had a terrible effect on each other, and now they're both like even more messed up going forward. Like they both had their problems and their issues, and now it's like nothing was solved. It was just more like highlighting their own weaknesses and failures.
So I see Alma going and leaving her fiance.
Yeah, I mean, if you trust that much, you think, that Alma will be like, no, I don't want to go down that road. I don't want to get married just to get married and have a kid just to have a kid. And Elizabeth, you get the sense that she always still loved her husband, but I don't know where that leaves her with the kid.
Just hates that little kid.
Yeah. And I mean, we didn't talk enough about it. I guess I'll put it in here too. Like, as I said early in the movie, the doctor seems to nail it herself when the doctor says it has a lot to do with like her rejecting her place in society. She hates what society expects of her, and she also hates that even though her job and profession is an actress, she kind of seems to resent society. That society keeps forcing her to play roles and wear masks and stuff like that. And in this weird mute state is the only way she can really be her true self. So that's what I think is kind of funny about the movie. It's like, it seems to me like the doctor already has everything nailed. She's figured it all out, but she's like, but anyway, I can't do anything about it. So here, you can use my summer home, and this young naive nurse without a lot of life experience will take care of you. And speaking of the life experience line, it shows that Alma had a certain amount of self-awareness, because you remember the start of the movie, after she first meets her and has a little talk with her, she comes out and the doctor says, "What do you think?" And she says, "I don't know. I think maybe I'm not up for it." She says, maybe she'd benefit from an older nurse, somebody with more life experience. Like, it seems once again she hits it on the nose. It's like, you guys all see the problem, and then you just go into the situation anyway, and this horrible disaster happens. I don't know.
You guys don't have any lesbian sex in my cottage.
Yeah, and for all we know, they did.
Yeah,
I mean, because as daring as the movie is, it can only go so far. So if it's hinting that, it had to be super subtle about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I always thought the biggest nod to that, like I said, was just the way that it didn't even have to do with necessarily sexual or tension or that. They just seemed to really behave like they were a couple. They just seemed to really bask in each other's company and seem so comfortable. The part where you know, and I know women are a bit different than men. Women, they'll be a little more touchy-feel, you know, they'll hug and stuff or cuddle, and you know, guys will be like, "Gay," where it's a lot different. I know that, right? But I mean, even to that, you felt sort of a level of intimacy between them, I thought. But it's a good thing, really, the movie is as short as it is, because it's not an easy watch. It's kind of a gut punch in a lot of ways. It's an emotionally draining movie. I mean, I've been drained way more by other movies, but that's only because I related to them a lot more personally.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that I can't relate to personally this movie is really good. Otherwise, it might be a movie that would devastate me horribly, because it's still, you know, it's still pretty visceral in its way. Like, you really feel some of the torment and some of the pain that these characters feel, even if you don't really necessarily relate to them. Which again is testament to their performance, and also, like we said, shows that Bergman has a lot of versatility, because he was condensing kind of the themes that he usually did. He was making them much more personal and human, whereas most of his other movies were more sort of universal type themes, bigger things, as we said, like religion and death and just things like this. This is a more internalized, personalized type of experience, and it's handled really well. And we're almost done. Just trying to think. You know, I always like movies that are sort of about like a descent into madness, or, you know, somebody coming apart. We did a movie that came out just around the same time as this, which was Repulsion, which is by what's his name?
Polanski.
Yeah, Roman Polanski. Roman Polanski's play. You can see some parallels between that movie and this movie, although they couldn't possibly have influenced each other because they came out way too closely. But
similar.
Similar
themes.
Yeah, it's interesting that they're so similar in so many ways. Both black and white, and both about a young woman kind of unraveling.
Mm-hmm.
Knife in the Water has some of these elements too. Haven't seen that in a long time though.
I think Bergman and Polanski both have a thing for platinum blondes as well.
It definitely seems that way. Yeah. I mean, in a way, that was kind of what was popular in the era too, right?
That's true.
Like 50s into like late 60s. That's what a lot of the leading actresses were. It's hard to think of like super popular brunettes for that period. I mean, Elizabeth Taylor maybe.
Definitely American. I can think of a few British ones.
Because even when you're naming some of the ones that were brunettes, they were probably like dyed blondes for those roles, even if they weren't real blondes. Because it was a very popular thing in cinema at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Hitchcock liked them too, right?
Yeah.
Like Kim Novak in
Well, I think men in general like platinum blondes, so it's not too big of a stretch to say.
Sure. I've talked about this before. Growing up, I had crushes on various blondes that I knew, and I wound up never really dating one. I've not never had any interaction with blood. I have, but none of my serious relationships were with blondes at all.
Me either.
In fact, all my serious relationships were with dark-haired girls, And yes, a few of them are Asian, so that's kind of expected, but others weren't, you know. Funny how things work out. There's still time. There's still time for me to have a meaningful relationship with an attractive blonde. Here's hoping. I hope. It's an experience I would like to add. We'll see. But anyway, it's one of those things where I know more stuff's going to occur to me later. But
yeah,
we got pretty in there, and we had a nice, as usual, we had some diversions about some other stuff. But the porn is not completely unrelated. We were talking about a sex scene. Well, it was well, as we said, you don't see the sex scene, but a sex scene is described in the movie. And we had to know, is it really an orgy? Is it a foursome? It's not a gangbang. We know that. Still waiting for a movie that talks about a gangbang. Actually, what's funny is, did you know that word appeared? The movie Grease is really raunchy. I think a lot of people forget that because think of it as good family fun. Like there's a part in Grease where like Kaneki is out on his date with Rizzo, but all his like friends like show up when they're in the car, and she goes, "What is this? A gangbang?"
Oh wow!
Like, it's a movie like kids, like parents are always playing to their kids, saying, "This is a fun movie. This is a good movie." There's all sorts of sexual stuff in that movie, and that's just one of them. That's one of the only movies I can think of that references, and it's kind of the last thing you'd think. And speaking of the pretty blonde, oh my God, Olivia Newton-John back then. Oh man, everybody wanted that good girl. I know bad girls are fun, but Olivia Newton-John in her like 50s cheerleader outfit and her hair tied back, so wholesome. Oh, that did it for me. And her, of course, her accent helped too. And then she had to ruin it by making the video for Physical.
Didn't she have a whole music career there for a little bit?
Oh yeah, she was always that. She was primarily a pop star.
Really?
More so than an actress. I mean, that was why she was in Grease, because she had singing ability. Not that a lot of actresses do, but I just mean they really wanted to go there. But yeah, I mean that was her thing. I mean, she performed at like I don't know if it was 80 or 84, one of those. She performed at the Olympics opening ceremony. So we're talking like audience of millions and millions. Might have been the 84 Olympics in LA. Might have been her. I know the big one for LA was what's his name? Hello, Dancing on the Ceiling. Lionel Richie.
Oh, okay.
Because I think it's probably been broken, but I remember looking up for like many years, like the largest television audience of like a musical performance was like Lionel Richie for like the opening or possibly closing ceremonies of the 84 Olympic Games, which were in LA.
He was big.
But anyway, she was at like one of those. She did it. But yeah, she was primarily a pop star. That was what she did more so than acting. But but Physical is a terrible song, and even for her 80s video, it's an embarrassing. What a terrible song. I mean, it's cute seeing her in like 80s workout clothes and all, but it just means such a stupid song. It has horrible lines like, "I want to hear your body talk." I don't want to know what that sounds like, but it doesn't sound good.
Yeah, I'm looking at her filmography, and it's all like music videos.
Yeah. She was a pop star.
Grease, Xanadu, which is
musical
classic.
Yeah. In a way, it's kind of a classic. Not the way they were hoping.
Yeah, pretty much it. And then she died of she died, right?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, I'm getting her confused with someone else.
I mean, I haven't seen her in a long time, which is good.
No, she's still alive.
I don't like seeing people old. But I mean, I know she still looks really good for her age.
Mm-hmm. I'm getting her confused with Farrah Fawcett for some reason.
She's 72 now. But like 10 years ago, she looked fantastic. And that was like she was in her 60s. So nobody can hold on forever. But yeah, I know she's. Yeah, that's right. Farrah Fawcett died in like 2009 when all those other celebrities died. We had like a wave of celebrity deaths.
Yeah, Ed McMahon and Farrah Fawcett died like the day before Michael Jackson, and he kind of overshadowed everyone.
And there were some weird smaller ones like Billy Mays, the guy that did all those weird infomercials and yelled at you.
Yeah, he died of like cocaine overdose or something too, or cocaine-induced heart attack.
Yeah, that sounds about right for world famous pitchman.
Guess that's what it takes to get your energy level up that high.
Probably not at first, but I bet you that life beats you down, so you need it, right? It's like, how am I going to
imagine, man?
Like smile and yell on camera about this stupid product? Billy Mays here. But anyway, yeah, there are quite a few celebrity deaths in 2009. Yeah, poor Farrah Fawcett, one of the great beauties of the 70s. So many people of a certain age talk about having like a Farrah Fawcett poster on their wall.
Yeah. Yeah, I was a little before my time, but I saw Boogie Nights.
Yeah. I never had posters of the 90s babes, although I loved lots of 90s babes. I was never that old,
I feel like it's kind of
that kind of guy.
Yeah, it's kind of pathetic in a way, isn't it?
Yeah. One of my friends on my street, his older brother, actually, I think I talked to him before, and I mean, I like his older brother now, but back when I didn't like, he had like all sorts of like, I don't think it was any specific 90s babes, but he had like models like post plastered all over his wall when he was a teenager. And yeah, it does look kind of embarrassing, really.
Yeah.
It's like overcompensating. Like, right. It's like, I love babes, I love hot chicks.
I feel like you may be in the closet. You know, I mean, it was a thing in college, like, bros, got something with just, chicks and Daisy Dukes or showing their ass or something, something not, nude, but, scantily clad. That was a pretty popular thing.
Honestly, I'd think like a tasteful nude would be better.
Yeah.
It would be more classy than just like some pinup or calendar shoot or something like that, right?
Yeah. I was never like that either. I don't think even if it was like acceptable, I would want to do it. It just comes across as pathetic or insecure.
But I don't know. I mean, if somebody was going to give me like a mint condition Farrah Fawcett poster, sure, because that's like a collector's item.
Yeah.
And all the ladies had Bruce Jenner on there.
How things have changed.
Things have changed. But anyway, that'll wrap up. Like I said, there's no reason to get to 3 hours on this one. But so that's Persona. We'll finally and as we said, it's a super complex movie that's been analyzed to death. You look it up, you'll find all sorts of articles and things about it, interpretations, and that's why it's interesting to talk about. And I'm sure Jay and I probably couldn't add anything that hasn't been already added to the cultural lexicon or zeitgeist, but wanted to give our own thoughts on the movie and definitely recommend it, because I mean, one of the reasons we do the show is because we have an audience that sometimes might not be as aware of some of these movies, but we try to recommend them because they're definitely interesting and fun to watch.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was good to do Bergman again, and just like it. Yeah, so we've got other guys from our Masters of Film series who I'm sure at some point we'll do another movie by those guys too, because there's definitely some other ones to do. I mean, there's no way we don't do at least a couple more Ozus, because I just have a weird unhealthy obsession with Ozus movies. But all the others will definitely probably at least get one more, because they're all got some really interesting films.
Mm-hmm.
So that was Persona, but yeah, if you're interested, you can look up Hour of the Wolf. As I said, that's actually a fairly short episode because of technical difficulties, but at least we discussed the movie a bit there. If you're interested in more of our Bergman coverage, so because this one kept getting pushed back, and now we're doing it so late, we can't tell you what next week's is going to be, but we're going to get right on that. Hopefully, get some consistency going after kind of a run of bad luck. So we don't know what it's going to be, but we'll try to make an announcement on Twitter or whatever to let people know. I don't even know how many people are aware of the show happened because it got pushed so late, but whatever. Right. Hopefully you find it at some point. So thanks a lot for watching, guys, and that'll do for this week. So thanks a lot. Peace out.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.